AM 650 KGAB, Cheyenne's #1 news talk radio station. Doug Randall filling in for Glenn here one day only. Glenn taking some much-deserved vacation time. We're doing a primary election special on the phone. I believe I have Cheyenne resident Joe Shogren. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Good. How are you doing this morning?
Amazing. Nice sunrise.
Well, let's just go right to the chase. What did you think of the election results yesterday? What's your reaction to it?
I think we had a pretty good turnout. I think we got a lot of people through the primary. That was good. The northern counties seem to be rejoicing in conservative turnout, and pretty excited about the mayoral race that we got Rick Coppinger through.
Now, Rick did come in second. It appears that Cheyenne Mayor Marion Orr has been eliminated from re-election. Rick did finish well behind Patrick Collins. He's got a lot of work to do. How does he catch up?
I think he has to catch up to due diligence and getting his name out there. I think he needs to do a multi-pronged assault on the voters so he can actually get his name out there and get his ideals to the voters.
Now, we did have some legislative races, and as I think you just alluded to a moment ago, we had a couple of pretty well-known incumbents turned out of office. First of all, Michael Von Flattern, senator in Campbell County, got absolutely trounced, got something like 36% of the vote against Troy McCown. I didn't follow that race closely. My understanding is that gun rights were a major issue in that campaign. Joe, I know you're a strong conservative. You're probably pretty pleased with that result, I would think. Am I right?
Yes, I am. You know, the Second Amendment, in my opinion, is one of the most advocated amendments I mean to advocate for, and getting him out of office was, I believe, a good move for Wyoming.
Now, there's another race that was a little bit closer, but it appears that Tyler Lindholm in House District 1 has been defeated by Chip Neiman. And again, I didn't follow that race closely. I believe, however, that Chip Neiman generally ran to the right of Tyler Lindholm. Do you have any thoughts on that race?
Tyler's a really good guy, but, he kind of voted very moderately a lot of times. So I believe that another win for conservatives in Wyoming.
Now, a bit closer to home, it appears that Anthony Bouchard has survived a strong primary challenge from Aaron Johnson. That was a pretty close race. It did get pretty contentious at the end, but the last time I checked, it did appear that he was up by a 52-48 margin. What's your reaction to that race?
I think that was a very close race. It was very contentious. You know, you kind of had the old school Republican versus the conservative Anthony Bouchard types, and Anthony has a very solid conservative voting record, so I believe his voting record kind of shined through.
Now, he will face, I believe, a Democratic opponent in the fall, Brittany Wallish. Do I have that right?
I believe so.
What do you think about that? Getting 52% in a primary, does he need to be worried at all, or do you think he'll cruise?
I think with the contentious race he just went through, I think he'll cruise through. For the future, I believe that he will do well in the general against Wallish, but I do wish that it wasn't such a contentious race in that primary.
It did get kind of heated down there towards the end.
Yes.
Go ahead, Joe.
There's a lot of throwing back and forth, and whenever a candidate throws back and forth, as we learned from the city council race in Ward 2, it's kind of how you get into office too. It's not just about your values.
Now, another legislative race. It appears Dan Zwanitzer handily survived a challenge from John Harvey in his race. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm disappointed in a lot of ways in that one, but I do understand. We got a multi-term legislator, and an incumbent is difficult to defeat.
Well, and the district always plays into it too. And Dan has held that seat, I believe, since 2005. Presumably, a lot of the voters in the district, they must like him. He's been there a long time, and I guess that showed up on Tuesday. It's tough to run against a long-term incumbent if you're not well recognized as far as name recognition, though. It really is.
Absolutely.
Now,
Absolutely. Name recognition is everything in races.
Now, Affie Ellis did survive a primary challenge. We had her on the air this past weekend. What are your thoughts on that race?
I believe Dan Young did a good job campaigning, and Alfie Ellis, I mean, she has very good name recognition, and I guess the people in her district approve of her.
Now, let's talk about some of those council races. You mentioned Ward 2. What do you take away from that, where I believe James Johnson is the odd man out?
You know, the thing I take away from that is campaign strategies and the way you treat your potential constituents. You know, you got to be open to all, especially a nonpartisan. You know, James Johnson was by far probably the strongest conservative in that race, but he also ran kind of a push campaign to where he was antagonistic to a lot of people.
And in Ward 3, and this is going to be an interesting race to watch this fall, because for all intents and purposes, we have three incumbents in the race. Yeah, Richard Johnson's been out of office for a while, but he's extremely well known. But you've got Richard Johnson, you've got Michelle Aldrich, who pulled 2,000 votes, and I believe actually led all vote getters, and you've got the incumbents Rocky Case and Mike Luna, and that actually there was not a lot of separation there. That's a tough one to predict, because I think you could make an argument for any two of those candidates being elected in November. What do you think?
I absolutely think any one of those two candidates can pull this off. You know, it's such a close race, and I mean, kudos to Michelle Aldrich for actually becoming the top vote earner there, being the non-incumbent. I'm not too sure. That one's very close to call. You know, as far as conservatives go, I'd probably go with Case and Luna, but that was a very close race.
Now, in the Laramie County Commission, we had two incumbents who racked up fairly easy wins, as we had Buck Holmes, a longtime commissioner, and then Brian Lovett, who was appointed earlier this year. Also, you know, and they went pretty handily. I believe they got over 5,000 votes each. The third place finisher, Taft Love, got something like 3,700. Was that a case of just the power of incumbency and name recognition, or do you think there were some other factors in that race?
I believe there's two factors in that. You know, the power of being the incumbent is definitely a factor, and then the second factor, I believe, is the large pool of people running, because you know that works against the newbies, because there's so many people to choose from, so the vote basically gets spread out, divvied out over, you know, that many candidates. So the incumbents definitely hold an edge there.
Yeah, and of course, Buck has been in office a long time, very well known, particularly maybe in some of the rural parts of the county. He's a rancher. He's got good name recognition. Brian Lovett, a guy who was appointed earlier this year to replace Amber Ash, though, he did pretty well too, and I don't know if you can necessarily lay that all on name recognition, because he hasn't been there all that long. Apparently he ran a pretty good campaign, I would infer.
I believe he ran a decent campaign. You know, I think the biggest thing is the name recognition, plus he also had kind of the old school party backing from a lot of the people around the county.
Okay, I'm on the phone with Joe Sjogren. Joe, you're the administrator of the group Being Informed Conservative Wyoming Facebook page. Is that right?
I'm on that page. I run the Cheyenne, Wyoming News.
Oh, I apologize. I got the wrong one. Okay.
Yeah, Lisa Glonner runs that one.
Oh, that's right. I got confused here. Now, were you surprised by the results versus the sort of comments that you saw on your Facebook page, or did they line up pretty well? In other words, what people said on social media, did that square with the election results or not?
I think that squared pretty well. You know, there's always going to be, like, you know, 4 or 5 guys that are really hardcore on one candidate or against one candidate, and I think the results pretty much conferred to what the results were. A little bit surprised by House District 43. I do think that one should have been a little bit closer, according to what I was reading on Facebook.
And who were the candidates there again? Refresh my memory.
That was Zewanitzer and Harvey.
Oh, right, John Harvey, yes. Well, like I said, Dan's been there a long time. He's got great name recognition. His father was in the legislature for a long time. You know, running against a long-term incumbent is not the easiest thing. I did have John Harvey on my Saturday show. I thought he spoke well. But that's, you know, it's tough to defeat somebody who's been there a long time unless they do something to really antagonize the voters. Apparently, Dan Zwanitzer, it looks like, based on the vote totals, didn't do that. Go ahead.
No, Dan Zwanitzer, he's a pretty copacetic type of guy. He doesn't really rock the boat very much. Like, if you look at, like, what Marion Orr was, she rocked the boat a lot with her personal life, which is sad. And I believe that's the reason why Rick got through in that race.
What do you think sank Marion's re-election race? What was the problem there?
I believe it was her personal life and how the private citizens picked up on her personal life.
Is that fair? Joe, is that fair or is that not fair, or how do you feel about it?
I feel kind of both ways on that. At one point, you've got Marion Orr's personal life, and, I mean, she deserves to have her personal life. On the other side, people do deserve to know somewhat of what's going on in their leaders' lives, just to know what's going on for their future in the city.
Now, going forward in the mayoral race, you mentioned that you think Rick's going to have to get out there and hustle and get his name out there based on the vote deficit he has to make up. That would, I think we could all agree on that. What do you see as the big issues in that race, though? What should the candidates be talking about going towards November 3rd in the Cheyenne mayoral election?
I believe the first and foremost would probably be budget. We've got to figure out a way to make more money, and preferably on my side, without increasing some sort of tax, because we're in financial trouble. Secondly, I believe open communication and civility. A lot of people don't really feel like their voice is heard with Marion, so I believe the next mayor needs to actually be able to confer with any different group of the populace.
As far as the budget, and I'm sure you know this, we're kind of limited in terms of the city budget as far as taxes. They can impose user fees, certainly to try and raise some money, but they're limited as far as the sales taxes they can collect. Do they need to cut some more, and what needs to be done? What are your thoughts on it?
I believe there definitely needs to be more trimming, and, I'm not really thinking jobs need to be trimmed, but as far as, more just administrative type stuff needs to be trimmed out. I also believe efficiency needs to be brought up as far as, like, our roads, potholes, and that sort of stuff, and infrastructure, because, of course, whenever you're dealing with the government, there's always some sort of waste, and people take advantage of the government because, sadly, there's not a lot of QA.
Can we afford to fix the potholes right now? Right
now, it's going to be tough. It's going to have to take some outside-the-box thinking to get all the potholes fixed and get the roads in good shape. It's kind of sad where we're at in the state. You drive around, I just replaced my shocks in my truck for the second time in 3 years. That's not what the city of Cheyenne constituents need. I believe definitely going to take some outside-the-box and a lot of employee share time as far as, pulling Parks Department employees over in the winter and pulling street department employees over to the parks in the summer.
Okay, I'm speaking.
I believe it's
Go ahead, Joe.
going to take a lot of different outside-the-box thinking to actually get this done with the budget we have.
Okay, I'm speaking with Joe Shogren, administrator of the Cheyenne and Wyoming News Facebook page. We'll be back. And you're in tune with AM 650 KGAB. Doug Randall filling in one day only for Glenn Woods. Glenn will be back from vacation tomorrow. On the phone, I have Joe Shogren, a local political activist, also the administrator of the Cheyenne and Wyoming News Facebook page. Joe, just in general on your Facebook page, what seems to be on people's minds? And I follow the page, but I'll let you kind of take it because you're an admin. What do you see people talking about? What are they worried about? What are they thinking about?
Personally, I think COVID is, like, incredibly just into everybody's faces. I believe people are on edge. The current events in Cheyenne and the world are scaring the hell out of everybody.
Do you think most people on the page feel like we've dealt with the problem well here in Wyoming, or how would you characterize that?
I would say a majority of them feel like the government is oppressing them. I would feel the majority of them believe that the government has kind of purposely tanked the economy at this point.
Purposely tanked the economy? They meant for that to happen?
I'm not sure if they meant for it to happen in the beginning, but, after this much time, we're at like 5 months right now, I believe the government needs to kind of review how we're handling COVID.
What would you like to see change in that regard? How should we be handling it here in Wyoming that we're not doing?
I would, reopen restaurants 100% to 100% capacity. Just kind of take the back off approach for now because we have low numbers, and continue going forward as far as bringing life back to just a normal life.
Do you think we should have a mandatory mask rule in Wyoming?
Absolutely not.
Do you think we should have any kind of mandatory restrictions at all, or would you kind of let people make up their own minds on how to deal with it?
At this point, I believe let people make up their own minds on how to deal with it.
Okay. And again, I'm speaking with Joe Sjogren, local political activist. He's also an admin for the Cheyenne and Wyoming News page, Facebook page. By the way, how many members do you have these days, Joe?
I believe we're at 7,500.
Are you looking for more or not?
Absolutely.
So for people who aren't familiar with your page, what sort of, and I know, but what do you do?
We post news articles. We open up discussions for anybody to talk, and we kind of give everybody a free voice.
You do enforce some civility rules, though, I believe. Is that right?
Yes. We've had some issues in the past of bullying, so if you bully, we will remove you. And we also don't allow cussing.
Okay. Joe, any other thoughts on the election going forward? Did we learn anything that we didn't know on Monday, just in general in Wyoming, either locally or statewide?
Not too much. It's kind of a mixed result. I will say Patrick Ramirez and, oh gosh, what's the other guy from the Democratic side?
For where at?
Lee Filer. Patrick Ramirez and Lee Filer.
Lee Filer, who's been in the legislature before, yes.
Yes, that was a very close race, and that one did kind of surprise me because on one side you had a BLM-style activist, and the other side you had a very conservative Democrat.
I've got to confess I haven't seen the results on that. How did that one come out?
Lee Filer won, I believe, 230 votes to 215.
So that actually was pretty close.
It was a very close race. I'm surprised that many people in Wyoming went towards the BLM-style activists.
Well, and it is a small sample size in all fairness, so there wasn't like it was, 20,000 voters, but, apparently some people liked what Mr. Ramirez had to say, and they voted for him, and he almost won. So I guess now that you mention it, I was a little surprised on that one, too. Also, simply in the fact that Lee Filer has been in the legislature. He's a name people recognize. Mr. Ramirez, probably not quite as well known, but he almost made up the difference. Apparently ran a pretty decent campaign, or it wouldn't have been that close. And any other thoughts, surprises, or impressions coming out of the election?
Oh, not so much. Not too much today, Doug.
Do you think the turnout was a little low?
I believe it was at 21,000
right.
for Laramie County.
We have 37,000 some odd voters, I believe.
Right. Primaries are always low. I looked at their primary results from 2016. I believe they're at 22,000. So it was actually pretty close. I don't think we're as low as we could have been.
Okay. Hey, Joe, I appreciate your time this morning. Thank you very much.
All right, cool. Thank you very much, Doug. You have a great day.
Talk to you later.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
AM 650 KGAB coming up the other side of the bottom of the hour information break. We'll be speaking with former Cheyenne City Councilman Richard Johnson. He, of course, did survive to go on for another round in Ward 3, and that's a tough ward. I was speaking with one of the other candidates in that ward this morning. You've got three incumbents and a very well-known challenger who has run before. So that's a pretty close race. I think all of the candidates who advanced at least were within 300 or 400 votes. So we'll hear what Richard Johnson has to think about that, or has to say about that particular race, maybe some of his thoughts on the mayoral results, city results in general, and he'll be with us just the other side of the bottom of the hour news and information break. In the meantime, if you have a quick question or comment, we do have open phone lines right at this moment, 632-6500, 632-3323. Again, reviewing in case you haven't checked the election results, maybe the big news locally. It appears, based on unofficial results, and I do need to emphasize these are unofficial results. They're not the final word, but it does appear that incumbent Mayor Marion Orr will not make the general election. She was the third out of three candidates. The top two advanced. Now, she was only about, it wasn't a huge margin. She was only about 300 behind Rick Coppinger, who came in second. Patrick Collins, longtime businessman, former city councilman, was way out in front on that one. And the raw vote totals, he got something like 8,500. I think Rick Coppinger got 2,900, and I think that Mayor Orr got 2,600 some. So the battle for second place was fairly close. However, as things stand right now, unless there's some kind of change, we won't be seeing the incumbent apparently on the November 3rd general election ballot. That would appear to be the case. Some local legislators, it looks like, surviving some challenges. Anthony Bouchard, pretty close primary, 52% to 48%, ahead of Aaron Johnson last time I checked. Dan Zwanitzer did survive his challenge against John Harvey. Dan Zwanitzer still pulling in a pretty strong showing. He's the longtime incumbent in that seat, and he fended off a challenge rather handily, it appears at this point, from John Harvey. It looks like Senator Affie Ellis was able to win her nomination or renomination battle, as well as she was able to hold off Dan Young, a newcomer in politics, local politics. A lot of times in politics, and I don't know if this is as true at the legislative level, but I know it's very true on the state level. You need to run at least once just to get your name out there. You almost expect to run and lose the first time just to get your name out there. It's hard to win as a first-time candidate, particularly if you're running against an incumbent, because they're well-known and, they probably have a lot of ties in the community, and obviously somebody liked them or they wouldn't have gotten elected. So it's not always the easiest thing to run against an incumbent. And as a first-time challenger, that can be a chore, but it looks like the local incumbent's doing pretty well. A couple of incumbents around the state, though, did lose. Michael Von Flattern absolutely got trounced in Campbell County. Senator Von Flattern, probably one of the more liberal members of the Wyoming legislative Republican membership. And it does look like Tyler Lindholm was narrowly defeated.
0123 or go to keyofcheyenne.com, and we'll make it easy.
AM 650 KGAB, the KGAB Wednesday morning election wrap-up special on the phone. I have former Cheyenne City Councilman Richard Johnson. Good morning, Richard.
Hey, how are you doing, Doug?
Pretty well. How about yourself?
I'm not used to waking up this early.
Okay. Well, you had a heck of a race last night. That's going to be a tough one in November. You've got four candidates all pretty close together. What do you think about it?
Well, I know. That's what... Like, I wrote to the newspaper last night when they asked me, and after I went to the clerk's office or clerk's website and looked at the numbers, I was like, wow, 312 between first and fourth, and Sean got 349, so wherever his votes go could literally determine the race, plus the 47 write-ins. And then because the presidential race wasn't yesterday, that's going to bring out, more people in November as well, so really, we're in no different position than we were yesterday morning.
What are you going to be talking about in the fall campaign? Why should people vote for you, Richard?
Well, I mean, really, as far as I'm going to continue doing what I do, which is fundraise. I actually have to do more of that today. I'm already involved in like 3 projects that I have to moving forward, and so I was already committed to those. So still basically the same thing. I mean, that's pretty much been my message the whole time, is I just get things done and I assist my community. I mean, there's not really, too much more, to debate than that. And then, but the other races were obviously more interesting than mine.
What did you think of the mayoral race? Were you surprised at how that came out?
Yeah, I was. I mean, it's very interesting because I actually thought Marion would have probably been the one that would have went through instead of Rick, but now looking at those numbers, it's kind of hard to say that Patrick's not going to be the next mayor because, he had such a strong lead over both of them that even if all of Marion's votes went to Rick, that potentially you wouldn't even beat, Patrick with Patrick's numbers yesterday.
So do you think Patrick Collins has it in the bag or not?
Unless he does something really dumb in the next few months, yeah, it probably is to have because, that's what we were talking about last night, that it was just, with him having that kind of lead, it was probably pretty guaranteed that he was gonna win.
Why do you think he did so well?
I actually have no idea.
Okay.
I don't, I guess.
That's an honest answer.
I really have no idea of why he did as well as he did, so, because I just don't have an answer to that.
Well, he is pretty well known. He was on the council for a long time, been a businessman here for many, many years, so I'm sure name recognition didn't hurt. I was honestly surprised at the margin there.
Right.
I thought he might come in first in the primary. I didn't know he would come in first
like
by
that, yeah, like first at that level. Yeah, that it would have looked. I would expected it to look more like what my race looked like, where the numbers would have been, fairly close. Excuse me, that the numbers would have been fairly close. That it would have seemed like it would have made a more dramatic race in November, but right now it doesn't look like it.
Is there anything Rick Coppinger can do to tighten that race, do you think?
I guess, he can definitely, try to cater to the people who did support Marion, and hopefully get them. And I guess, it is completely possible. I mean, like you said, it's not always necessarily a strength when somebody's been on council before. Excuse me. So, you can hope that, with him, that he can always go out there and get the people that are just, kind of fed up with the way things are ran in Cheyenne, period, like the, no incumbents rule, which I don't agree with. To me, it's whoever wins, wins.
Mm-hmm. What'd you think over in Ward 2? Were you surprised at those results?
No, not so much. I mean, that one, that one pretty much followed the way I thought it was going to go.
And
there was no surprises there, and then, of course, in Ward 1, everybody moved forward anyways because there was only 4 candidates.
Right, so there was no real big drama there.
No.
I don't know if when there's only 4 candidates, I don't know if that is a less solid indicator of what might happen in November or not, because everybody knows they're all going to win. So it really they're all going to win the primary, that is. So
yeah, I think a lot of them actually, just like us today, all of them knew they moved forward, and so they knew today was the day they actually had to start work for November, because they actually have to, jockey for position, and that, which surprised me, with the COVID this year, that there was, because usually Ward 1 has tons and tons of people that run for office there, so the fact that only 4 people, turned out to actually seek a candidacy in Ward 1 was actually the biggest surprise of Ward 1, this year, and then there was more people that ran, in Ward 2 than there's ever been, because usually it was, in 2014 it was just Dr. Rennie by himself. He ran unopposed, and then last time, there was, I believe, just Dean and Brian, Dickey, and and I can't remember, and then Ed Waddell. So there was 4 of them then, but not a lot of people usually turn out for candidacy in Ward 2. So the fact that they actually had 5 and somebody dropped, that was interesting that they had that many candidates.
You going to make a prediction in Ward 2 as to the 2 final winners?
No, I don't want to predict anything, because obviously it can always be wrong. I mean, with mine, I knew mine was going to be tight. I mean, I've been posting that for weeks, everybody was telling me that I was a shoo-in, and I'm like, no, I don't really think so. I think that, there's, 2 incumbents, that I'm going against. Michelle kind of, took everybody by surprise because she was the front runner. So, she did obviously good work in the primary, and then it'll just be, but even like what she said in the paper today was, this isn't a closed book case, because there is that only 312 between first and fourth.
And she has run before. She has some name recognition, so she's not a total unknown.
No, I mean, people know her, through the job, through, the school district and everything. So, I mean, she's familiar to people, and, yeah, she did run in. I can't remember if she ran in 2016 for the first time, and then no, I think she was in 2018, the last time. But, yeah, so she's ran, I think, at least once that I can remember.
Richard, what can we take away from yesterday's results, if anything? Do we learn anything or not?
Well, that basically our race is really contentious, and everybody's still going to have to get out in November. That this is, by all means, this is not said and done. Our race is very contentious. It's very tight. I mean, Rocky was only like 30-some votes behind Michelle, and I was only 70 behind him. So, there's definitely not a very good margin of error. And I believe a dedicated winner.
And I believe Mike Luna was the leading fundraiser, and he's also an incumbent, so you can't take him lightly either.
No, he wasn't the leading fundraiser.
Oh, he wasn't. Okay.
No. I think he on his funding. I think he only had his personal donation. I don't think he had collected anything.
But he did pretty well last night.
Yeah, I mean he had. I mean all of our numbers. He had like 1,690 and stuff, and then I was almost like 6 short or something, 1,900, and Rocky was at 1,670, and then Michelle was at 2,001. So, yeah, everybody was real close.
Well, Richard, I have another caller, another guest scheduled for 6:45. Any last thoughts for our audience here this morning?
Nope, but just to remind everybody, you've got to show up in November. This is not over.
And it's a big election.
Yep.
Thanks, Richard.
Well, thank you so much.
We'll talk to you later.
Bye.
AM 650 KGAB, Cheyenne's #1 news talk radio station. That was former Cheyenne City Councilman Richard Johnson, who, of course, is on the ballot again. He did survive the primary yesterday, moves on to the general election. Here in just a couple of moments, Amy Edmonds will be on the phone with us. Of course, she's been active in local politics for a long time. Her husband was a state legislator for a while. She's run some political campaigns. Used to be with the Wyoming Liberty Group, I believe, and we'll get Amy's take on the results yesterday. Maybe talking particularly about some of the legislative races. I think we had some pretty dramatic races. We had some people who survived and some people statewide who didn't survive. Michael Von Flattern going down in Campbell County. He actually got trounced pretty badly, something like 64-36%, and he was a long-term incumbent up there. He'd been in office a couple terms at least, I believe, so it wasn't some no-name that lost. And I believe the Second Amendment, if I remember from social media, was a big issue up there in that race. Also, and this was closer, it looked last time I checked like Tyler Lindholm in House District 1 was going to lose to Chip Neiman. Now, that was pretty close. That was like 52-48, 53-47. So that was still a pretty close race. But it did look like Tyler Lindholm would be defeated in his run for re-election. These are all unofficial results. I want to be clear on that. These are not final official results. Nothing we have today is a final official result. These are unofficial results. They have to be certified before they're official. So as of yet, it is not actually anything that's in the books. And you do have some close races where, I don't know, you might have a recount or two. I don't know. We'll see what happens. AM 650 KGAB, Cheyenne's #1 news talk radio station. Doug Randall filling in this morning with your Wednesday election wrap-up, waiting for a call from Amy Edmonds. And looks like we have Amy on the phone. Good morning, Amy. How you doing this morning?
I'm good. How are you, Doug?
Doing well. What can we take away from yesterday's election results? What did you learn, if anything?
Well, it's interesting. A couple weeks ago, I spoke to the cast for Star, and I said that I really felt that this election cycle, incumbents were going to have to really work for it. In Wyoming, typically incumbency is kind of a really good thing, a pretty sure ticket. And I think I was right. I mean, if you look across the state in Wyoming's House and Senate, we had a number of incumbents go down. In Cook County, we had Lindholm go down against Chip Nyman. In Campbell County, we had Senator Von Flattern go down against Tim McEwen. In Campbell County, Bill Pownell went down against Fortner. In Platte and Converse County, Kirkbride went down against Haraldson. In Johnson County, we had Richard Task go down. And then over against Crago, and then over in Park County, David Northrup, who's a House member, actually tried to grab a Senate seat from Hank Coe, who retired, and he went down against Tom French. So that is not typical. That's a lot of incumbents going down.
Well, and correct me if you think I'm wrong here, but the general trend with most of the people you mentioned was the more conservative candidate winning. Am I right on that?
Yes, that's exactly right. I mean, I think that was definitely the overall trend. Certainly some of the more moderate candidates did return and win over some candidates that were conservative, but this is a lot of incumbents that I see go down. I also saw an overall trend here, just looking at the numbers statewide, particularly in the federal races, not a lot of Democrat excitement, just not a lot of numbers going out. They just didn't seem to bring as many people to the polls as the Republican, and of course, that doesn't bode well for them going into November when we have a presidential election.
But could some of that have been the fact there weren't that many Democratic primary fights? There were some, but there weren't tons of them.
Yeah, there were. No, absolutely. And I think, the Democrats are posed. They really want to, from what I've heard, they would like to try to pick up some seats. But I think they've got a couple seats in play themselves. If you look over in Sweetwater County, Senator Lisa Anselmi Dalton, she actually she had less numbers than John Kalb, who's running against her, the Republican. And you have to remember, in November, we know nationwide and certainly here in Wyoming, Republicans are ready to literally swim across crocodile-infested waters to vote for Donald Trump. That kind of excitement is hard to reproduce, and I don't know if the Democrats can do that here in Wyoming. And then here in Marion County, Sarah Burlingham's numbers were not good against, she was running alone, but also against the Republican who was running alone in this primary. Just turned out didn't look that.
And in fact, we'll have Sarah coming up here later this morning. She'll be on the air giving us her take on things. Speaking of Sweetwater County, Amy, I happen to live out there for 15 years, and I can tell you the long-term political trend in that county has been strongly Republican. When I first lived there in the early 90s, Democrats did not lose races. Now you have people like Tom James, who defeated John Hastert a couple of years ago. That county has been trending Republican for probably 20 years. I don't know how much that will come into play with the Lisa Anselmi Dalton race, but I can tell you that politically the complexion of that county has changed a lot in the last couple decades.
It really has, and I know the GOP over there in Sweetwater County is really energized. It looks like Mark Baker's coming back. He ran and won in the primary. He was, a legislator several terms ago. So, no, I think you're absolutely right. They're definitely, GOP over there's definitely got a lot of energy.
I'd like to ask you about some local races. In the Senate, we had Anthony Bouchard survived a pretty contentious challenge from Aaron Johnson. What do you make of that one?
That was a hard-fought race, and there was a lot of that was a lot of punching on both sides. It was up in the air, and honestly, I couldn't make a determination. Other than I listened to some of Anthony's radio ads, and they were really, really good. You can't produce that kind of radio ads and not have a leg up, hopefully. But I think Aaron Johnson was a heck of a fighter. Saw a lot of her signs around town. It's, when you're coming up against an incumbent, it is really, you got to get your name out there.
You don't need a membership or password to get local news. Check out the latest Cheyenne and Wyoming headlines at KGAB.com.
AM 650 KGAB, Cheyenne's #1 news talk radio station. You're listening to the Wednesday morning primary election wrap-up. By the way, Glenn Woods will be back with you with Wake Up Wyoming tomorrow morning, bright and early at 6 a.m. On the phone, I have Amy Edmonds, longtime, I guess we could say longtime Republican activist. Would that be a fair statement?
Absolutely.
Now, Amy, back to the Senate District 6 race. When you've got a tough, hard-fought primaries you did there, does that tend to make you think the incumbent's going to have any problems in the fall election or not? He does face Brittany Wallish.
Yeah, I think he's got a tough challenger. Absolutely, the Democrats have put up a really good candidate there, and Anthony has not walked away without some bumps and bruises, and that's the downside of having those kind of tough races in the primaries. But yeah, he hasn't walked away clean from this.
Do you think the presidential election in November, when we have a much greater turnout, will bode well for him?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Bouchard will come out, Senator Bouchard. He will win that race. I truly believe it. I think Republican enthusiasm in November is going to be extremely high. I also think he's running on an issue to a certain extent that I think has an elevated interest in Wyoming, and that is gun rights. And I think we saw it with some of Aaron Johnson's answers on that just didn't quite cut it for most of us passionate Second Amendment folks, and I think gun rights are going to continue to be really important. When people in Wyoming are watching what's happening nationwide, Doug, and they're feeling, like our country's in big trouble, a sense of insecurity, knowing that your Second Amendment rights are secure is a pretty important topic.
And I think that was a big topic up in Campbell County in the defeat of Michael von Flattern. In fact,
It was.
I saw him posing on social media with a gun. I don't remember what make it was, trying to fend off some of the questions about his support of the Second Amendment, and apparently it wasn't enough, as he was beaten rather badly. That's a hot button issue in this state.
It really is, and because in Wyoming, most folks, the Second Amendment is not just the right to go out and hunt, and we are a big hunting state. Certainly, it's very important, but for most folks in the state, the Second Amendment truly is about being able to protect your life, your property, and your family. And the problem with Senator von Flattern is you can't just take a picture with a gun if your voting record doesn't show it.
Now, we did have a couple other primary challenges here locally where incumbents were able to survive. Affie Ellis winning against Dan Young. Thoughts on that race?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't surprised. Affie is a really good campaigner. She knows how to cover the bases. I think she's out there talking to her constituents, and so I wasn't surprised, and I think she'll pull through.
Now, how about Dan Zwanitzer winning pretty handily again as he faced John Harvey?
I mean, it was closer than I thought it was going to be, actually. Which I think, again, kind of speaks to the sort of work that people want incumbents to do. Incumbency shouldn't be taken for granted in Wyoming. Folks are not just going to check the box. They're going to look you over pretty strongly and check you out. And in those races, I think that shows that.
Amy, I do have to play a commercial break, and then we'll go into the top of the hour. So we're about done with this segment. Any last thoughts for our listeners this morning?
No, I think it'll be a really interesting race in November, but I do think, Doug, that Republican enthusiasm is going to be over the top.
Okay, Amy, thank you for coming back on the other side of the break. We'll hear from Laramie County Democratic Chairman Ben Rowland coming up at 7:30. We'll hear from one of the nominees for mayor of Cheyenne, apparently coming out of yesterday. That's Rick Coppinger. We'll talk to Rick about his winning the primary spot, apparently. Again, these are unofficial results, but according to the unofficial results, he did win the second spot by about 300 votes, with incumbent Mayor Marion Orr apparently being eliminated, pending any further developments there. And he'll be facing off against Patrick Collins. Rick's going to have to go out and work, though. He's got a deficit to make up. Patrick Collins got 8,500 votes. He got a lot of support yesterday. He's a well-known person in the community. Then again, I would expect the turnout would be much higher in November. It's almost a rule of thumb that presidential elections in Wyoming get really strong turnout. We might be talking about 60+% of the electorate turning out to vote, so there will be a lot of people voting in November who certainly did not vote yesterday. In any case, we're getting ready to go into a news and information break, and then about 7:05 back with the Laramie County Democratic Party chairman. That's just ahead here on AM 650 KGAB. AM 650 KGAB, Cheyenne's #1 news talk radio station, and we're doing a special Wednesday morning election wrap-up. I am expecting a call from Laramie County Democratic Party Chair Ben Rowland. Hope we didn't get our wires crossed. Ben, that number is 632-6500 if you're listening. In the meantime, kind of going over some of the results from yesterday and last evening. Probably the big news locally is that Cheyenne Mayor Marion Orr apparently has lost her re-election bid. 3 candidates in yesterday's mayoral primary. 2 of them advance, and she finished about 300 votes out of second place. And that does mean that presumably, unless something changes, she won't be on the ballot in November. Good morning. Am I speaking with Ben Rowland?
No, you're speaking with Lisa. Sorry for the disappointment.
Oh, that's okay, Lisa. What's on your mind, Lisa?
The last couple of days, I went through some of the campaign contributions on the Secretary of State's website.
Mm-hmm.
And most candidates have 1, 2, 3 pages of contributions.
Mm-hmm.
Alfie Ellis had 9.
Okay.
And there was a lot of out-of-state money.
Okay.
So I'm saying she didn't win just on her own efforts, is my point.
Okay, well, and that's certainly an opinion. Other people would probably argue that, well, it's not illegal to get contributions, so
No.
it just depends where you come down on the issue. Were you surprised or disappointed overall at the results yesterday? What did you think?
I was devastated by John Harvey's race. Dan didn't do anything to run.
Right. He's been
He had hardly any contributions, and all of them were from out of state. I didn't see a sign for him. I saw nothing from him. And John was out there all the time.
Well, it's tough, and I was talking, I don't know if you were listening earlier, I was talking about this on the air. It's tough to win a political campaign as a first-time candidate, all the more so when you're running against a long-term incumbent. You're up against name recognition. Dan Zwanitzer's had that seat, I believe, since like 2005 or 2010. I'd have to double check, but I believe
it's 5.
I think it is 5, and it's been quite some time. And I had John Harvey on my Saturday show. I thought he gave a good interview. I thought he presented himself well. It's just really tough to win against multi-term incumbents, and that's true if you're talking about the Wyoming legislature or U.S. Congress. In Congress generally, and I'll speak more about that because it's something I have researched as opposed to something I haven't researched for the legislature. But if you're a representative or senator in the U.S. Congress, generally, unless you really mess up pretty badly or have an unusually strong challenger, if you win your first re-election bid, you're pretty much home free. Multi-term incumbents don't often lose. It happens, but it doesn't happen a lot.
Well, I'm just really disappointed in that district because Dan Zwanitzer has a 9% out of 100 conservative vote record.
I would imagine, though, you're a little happier about Senator Von Flattern losing. Am I right?
Yes. And we need to be talking to the people in that area of the state because they did a fantastic job getting good people elected.
Well, and I think the big issue in his race specifically, I didn't follow it closely because I don't live there, but I did follow it on social media, and it seemed like the big issue there was the Second Amendment. I did see a post on Senator Von Flattern's reelection Facebook page where he was posing with, I believe it was a shotgun. I've seen so many social media posts in recent days. I
they
could
blend
be
together.
Yeah, I think he was posing with like a 12 gauge or something. Could be wrong on the make of the gun, but and that didn't go well for him. He got swamped, and he's been in the legislature for a while. He's an exception to the thing about multi-term incumbents winning because I think he's been there for.
He's been there for a long time.
He has, and he didn't come close. He absolutely got trounced. So that was a little surprising. Bill Pownell, also up in Campbell County, the former sheriff up there, he's another guy that lost. And from following the legislature, I think it would be somewhat safe to say that as Wyoming Republicans go, he maybe was a little more on the liberal side of the state Republican Party. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes. I don't know his record as much as I know some other ones, so he must follow more left moderate. I mean, if he was extreme one way or the other, I would know him.
Right. I don't think he was uber liberal by any means, but as Wyoming Republicans go, certainly probably not someone you'd consider a rock-ribbed conservative either. And, you normally figure a former sheriff who's got to be well-known in the county. I mean, he did get into some trouble. I don't know if you followed this. His son got busted for drunk driving, and there was some...
Yeah.
And there were some issues about whether that was hushed up a little bit or not. And I'm not going to say if it was or wasn't. I'm just saying there were some issues about it.
Neither one of us are there. So.
Right. And I don't know what did or didn't happen. All I know for sure is his son got arrested for drunk driving. And there were allegations, and I'll stress they were allegations. I don't know that they were true, that he tried to cover it up. And that's kind of what happened with the sheriff's race. But it obviously... or a sheriff's office. It obviously didn't hurt him too much in the legislature, though, because he won easily before. So I don't know what you make of that. Now, Lisa, you're probably pretty happy about Anthony Bouchard winning, if I know you.
Oh, yes.
That was a pretty close race and pretty contentious race.
That was a pretty contentious race, but, it turned out, I don't want to say too much because I don't have it in front of me and I don't want to get facts wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But she had Democratic support, too, financially. So, yeah, I'm thrilled that Anthony won. I mean, he has a stellar voting record. And he's not a one, keep hearing he's a one-issue guy. No, he's not. He's very strong, pro-life. He fights hard for education, not public schools, but that the kids get the right kinds of things in school.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's been an outstanding senator.
And he did win. It was a close one. He will face Brittany Wallish, the Democratic nominee in November on the November 3rd general election ballot. Lisa, just in general, what do you take away from yesterday?
Well, I think the mayor's race teaches us if you can't handle your personal life, you have no business trying to run a city.
Were you surprised that she lost?
I'm thrilled.
Not a fan. So, not a fan, I take it.
No, not at all.
Rick Coppinger.
Personally, I'll be doing whatever I can to help Rick Coppinger out.
He's got quite a deficit to make up, though. I believe Patrick Collins got like 5,000-6,000 votes more, so he's going to have his work cut out.
Yeah, but Patrick Collins has a record, too.
That's also true. Lisa, any other thoughts for us this morning?
Nope, that's just what we need to learn from Campbell County. That's
in terms of recruitment or issues or what?
How to get incumbents out and get the right people in. Okay.
Well, Lisa, I appreciate the call. This Cheyenne's #1 news talk radio station. You're in tune with the 2020 primary election Wednesday morning wrap-up. Glenn Woods will be back with you bright and early with Wake Up Wyoming tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. In the meantime, looks like we have some open phone time if you have anything on your mind. Curious what your thoughts are on the election. Anything from Mayor Orr losing in the primary to the turnout, to quite a few legislative incumbents losing, to the incumbents winning in the Laramie County Commission. Anything else that might be on your mind? How do you think Joseph Biden will affect the November general election? Will he get Democrats to turn out, or will it be a typical Republican year in Wyoming? Those are all topics you could chat about if you have anything on your mind. 632-6500, 632-3323. Have been chatting with Glenn on Facebook, and he might be calling in. I'm not sure if he got my last message, but again, in case you're just joining us, and we do have open phone lines right now, 632-6500, 632-3323. If you have anything on your mind, give us a call. Anything election related, we are kind of keeping it to that. But do you think COVID-19 kept the turnout down? Turnout was not huge. I'll be talking to the county clerk today to get a comparison. In fact, she'll be on the air with us at about 9:45 to get a comparison between this year and previous years in terms of was our primary turnout really that low? I'm not sure if it was or if it wasn't in terms of primary elections. I do know that in general you don't draw the turnout in a primary election in Wyoming that you do for a general election. That's just how it works, and I'm sure that's true across the country, unless you have some unusually contentious primaries. That would be the exception to that, and if you do, that'll get some folks to turn out. We had some primaries here in the legislature yesterday where we had a few hundred people turn out, not necessarily locally, but just in general. Then again, Wyoming, a low population state. Some of the primaries probably not all that hotly contested. I believe we have Glenn Woods calling in right now, if I'm not mistaken. Good morning, Glenn. You're on the air.
Good morning, Mayor Randall. I hear you have a new job.
Yeah, I don't think so.
No, okay.
So what do you think about the results?
Well, in some cases, I was interested in watching, and you'll have to tell me if you know what the latest numbers is for, let's say, Liz Cheney, because so many people were calling my program and telling me that they were tired of her speaking out against Trump, and by the volume of polls, you might get the impression that, well, maybe there'd be a backlash against her. But last time I looked before I went to sleep last night, she had like 76% of the vote or some obscene number like that. What did it turn out to be?
I don't have that in front of me, but I can tell you she won walking away. It was not close, as did Cynthia Lummis as well.
Yeah, easy to do, yeah. Now, a few of our well-known names around the state of Wyoming are gone. Tyler Lindholm was a bit of a surprise to me, but it looks like he's not back.
And that was a close race. I was a little surprised at that. But I guess his opponent, Chip Neiman, just ran a good race.
Sure. And then on the other hand, Michael von Flederen, who is up in Campbell County, Wyoming, is no longer Senator von Flederen. Instead, Troy, who owns the family-operated business Don's Supermarket, handily beat him out. So some of those I looked at and thought, well, that actually wasn't too surprising to me. When I got into some of the more local races, there are people in Natrona County and Casper saying that town actually went a little bit more to the left. But now, what is your impression of what happened in Cheyenne?
Well,
was there some, besides the mayor, was there some turnover in the city council?
Besides the, well, we don't have a final verdict on that because we have 4 candidates advancing from each ward.
Okay.
And no incumbents were eliminated yesterday. We had 2 people eliminated,
Right.
James Johnson in Ward 2, who's been a vocal critic of the city government, and then we had Art Funk, who was eliminated in Ward 3, and I'm just not sure that he was that well known. All of the incumbents did advance. You do have kind of an interesting situation in Ward 3 because you've got 2 incumbents, Rocky Case and Mike Luna. You've got somebody who's so well known they're practically an incumbent, Richard Johnson, and then you've got a local educator who led the field, Michelle Aldrich, who got the most votes, but they're all within 300 votes. That's going to be an interesting one.
Okay. Well, now, I still would like to see, when we're done looking at some of the bigger towns around Wyoming, what happened in some of the smaller communities as well, to get a feel what happened across the state of Wyoming. Because the big races in the big towns always make the big headlines, but there's so many smaller towns and areas out across Wyoming that we need to pay attention to if we want to get a feel for which way Wyoming's going.
I can tell you this, a lot of, well, not a lot, but several legislative incumbents lost. Bill Parnell, the former sheriff up in Campbell County, he lost.
Right.
We had Representative Northrup, who was actually going for a Senate seat trying to replace Hank Coe. I guess technically he's not an incumbent, but he is certainly a known name. He was unsuccessful in that bid. Richard Tass in the State House, relatively liberal for Wyoming Republican, he was defeated. So we had some big names go down. Here in Laramie County, though, that was not the trend. Anthony Bouchard, something of a conservative firebrand, he survived a challenge from Aaron Johnson. That was a close race, 52-48. Anthony Bouchard does survive, however. A couple of other incumbents, not nearly that close. Dan Zwanitzer in the State House, who's been there since, I believe, 2005. He faced an energetic opponent in John Harvey, who got out there and worked hard. Dan didn't really campaign all that hard. He still won walking away. And Senator Affie Ellis in the Senate also turned back a challenge from a Republican challenger in the primary, Dan Young. I think we could probably say Dan was trying to run to her right. However, she was reelected handily. So kind of a mixed bag. Glenn, what do you think? What do you think? Go ahead.
It does seem to me, when I take a look at some of the names that have been around for a while that have left, but tell me if you get a different impression of this, it seems like the more left-leaning Republicans, because as you know, there's a lot of Republicans in the House and Senate in Wyoming that are not so right-wing, they're more left-wing Republicans, if they're Republican at all, and a lot of those people are gone, and it seemed to go a bit more conservative.
As a general trend, I would agree with that. In fact, I had Amy Edmonds on the air here last hour, and we chatted about that. Senator von Flattern, probably about as liberal of a Republican as you'll find anywhere in Wyoming, and he got absolutely trounced. The Second Amendment, I believe, was a big issue in that race. I saw him on Facebook posing with, I believe it was a shotgun. And he'd been there for a while. I believe you knew him when you were up in Campbell County. Do I have that right?
I did, yeah. And that's one of the reasons in fact, it's good to point him out, because he ran as a Democrat twice, then ran as an independent, and finally ran as a Republican and won several times. So I think that's one of those more to the left in the Republican Party, but a lot of people never considered him a conservative Republican. So he's finally gone.
Glenn, one that was a little surprising to me was Tyler Lindholm being upset. What did you think about that?
I was a bit surprised by that. There's times that people really like what Tyler has done. The Wyoming Food Freedom Act was one of them. So there's times that people have cheered him on. But then on the other hand, he's done and said some things that made people wonder if he should be in office at all. So he was sort of a mixed bag. People didn't quite know how to take him. Again, was he more to the left or more to the right? Well, it depended on what issue you would talk to him about as to which way he would go.
He had been critical of American military involvement. He'd been on your show talking about
He had
that.
been, yeah. There are those who, and Liz Cheney's one of those who's more of a hawk and would like to see the military stay overseas and to have us continue doing what we're doing. And then there's those people who would like to see more of our military come home because they've been out there for such a long time. It'd be a good idea just to bring them home and let them rest and let some of the rest of the world take care of their own problems. So Liz Cheney was also, again, more hawkish on that, but you have a Tyler Lindholm who's a bring them home. Even a President Trump wants to bring them home. So there's a bit of a split in the Republican Party over that.
Glenn, were you surprised at our mayoral election down here?
No.
Why not?
She had, I think, over time, done a lot of damage to herself. And at some point, she just, I think, fell behind enough that she wasn't going to win that race again. Just too much controversy, and at times, she will grab her phone and say things on Twitter that later she'll regret or say things publicly that later she'll regret. And there's some other controversy surrounding her to the point that I think people had seen a bit too much drama and decided, let's just make a change.
So looking at the election as a whole, do you think we can say there's an anti-incumbent mood in Wyoming, or can we not just the mayoral election, but the primary in general?
I think overall, yes, there's a bit of an anti-incumbent movement in Wyoming, and it's an interesting shift also to see where that happened, because as I said, in Natrona County, not so much, but around other parts of the states, especially in the most of the eastern part of Wyoming, northeastern especially, there was a big anti-incumbent movement. So that was interesting to see. I want to find out what the results are from, up in Cody and who knows what happened out in Jackson, but there's, even heading over to Rock Springs to see if that movement was the same.
Well, I can tell you this, speaking of Cody, Representative Northrup, who'd been in the legislature for quite some time, was running to replace Senator Hank Coe of Cody, who'd been there, seems like forever. I guess when you say that he's running for a new office, he's not an incumbent, but it certainly was a case of an incumbent politician losing Representative Northrup, even though he was running for a new office. So you can almost count that among the anti-incumbent mood as well, I would say.
Right.
So what
there was a big push. Go ahead.
What did happen in Natrona County? I haven't really had a chance to study that yet.
My understanding, and I'm going by what people are saying, I haven't really sat down and dug into the numbers yet, but while there were some changes made in Natrona County, those people on the far conservative right are complaining, hey, you moved us more left. So maybe there was a change, but not the one that anti-incumbent movement wanted to make. And if you have been watching social media, there has been a big push for over a year now to get a lot of these older incumbents out. And I think that movement was somewhat successful this time around.
Well, we've also had, I would almost say, something of a civil war in the Republican Party here.
Yes.
Since January, between the Frontier Republicans and the folks who say the Frontier Republicans are too liberal.
Yeah, and there was even a knockdown, drag-out fight about that. So, yeah, when they had that convention in Gillette, as a matter of fact. Yeah, there's been
literally a fight, yeah.
Yes, there's the group that, again, the Frontier Republicans, again, who are more left-leaning, and then there's a group that came in who was, that's enough of this, we want to push the rhinos out. And they went head-to-head when they arrived at the Republican convention. So we can see that I think for the most part, not entirely, but for the most part, the more right side, the more conservative side of the Wyoming Republican Party won this. They got some good punches in this round.
So what do you think that'll mean for our state budget going forward? How will this affect what the legislature does?
That's going to be interesting because I do find a lot of people and claim to be very conservative, but when it comes to spending money, especially in their own district, still spend a lot of money. So I have yet to be impressed with either Democrats or Republicans or even people more left or right-leaning when it comes to spending taxpayers' money. I'm waiting to see people in there who are not just more conservative in the way they vote in their politics, but are more fiscally conservative. That's what I'm waiting to see.
Glenn, how do you think the presidential contest will affect Wyoming? We have about a minute and a half left. So
that's well in the presidential contest. I think that Wyoming just goes for Trump. It's just going to be that easy. Wyoming just going for Trump now. And who wins it will have a lot to do with. Will have a lot to say about how Wyoming has to make a living, because if one candidate wins, let's face it, we have always been an energy state and an agricultural state, and if Biden wins it, well, we've got some major trouble.
Mm-hmm.
If Trump wins it, on the other hand, it might just open the doors. In fact, it already has opened the doors since he's been in office to making Wyoming more successful. So get coronavirus out of the way and continue on with the Trump presidency, and you'll find business booming in the state of Wyoming. But bring this to a Joe Biden presidency, and no, we're going to have to find another way to make a living.
Glenn, we're just about out of time. I do appreciate you calling in this morning. Enjoy your last day of vacation. We'll listen tomorrow morning when you're back on the air.
Thank you, Doug.
Talk to you later. AM 650 KGAB, Glenn Woods, Wake Up Wyoming host, joining us for that segment. We're going into a bottom of the hour break. On the other side, we'll hear from Cheyenne mayoral candidate Rick Coppinger, one of the successful nominees last night. We'll be talking with Rick here at about...
What's playing out in Pike County, Ohio right now.
Listen to the Piketon Massacre wherever you get your podcasts.
This weather update brought to you by Four Corner Siding. No matter the weather, Four Corner Siding can help protect your home. Looking at a gorgeous sunny Saturday for the capital city and southeastern Wyoming. Highs upper 80s to low 90s with a clear night tonight and lows in the lower and mid 50s. Your Sunday outlook, much the same. Sunny to mostly sunny. Upper 80s, low 90s, lows mid 50s, mostly clear Sunday night. Lower 90s return for Monday and Tuesday. Lots of sunshine. Isolated thunderstorms by the middle of the week. I'm day weather meteorologist Don Watzel.
Principles with passion. The Sean Hannity Show. Weekdays at 1 and Sunday mornings at 8. Part of the best team in talk on AM 650 KGAB.
1 in 3 adults in America have pre-diabetes, but most don't know it. To let people know it can be reversed before it becomes type 2 diabetes, professional basketball player Julius Randall is doing everything in reverse.
I'm only dunking with reverse windmills. I drove the whole way to practice in reverse. I don't recommend it. This move's called the reverse shuffle. I do recommend it. And it took me months to learn how to speak in reverse, like this. Here's 10 almost for diabetes type 2 with living Ben has mom my. In other words, my mom has been living with type 2 diabetes for almost 10 years. So together, we want to say to the 84 million Americans at risk, exercise and healthy eating can help reverse prediabetes. Start by taking a simple 1-minute risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org.
Brought to you by the Ad Council and its Prediabetes Awareness Partners.
Bet he can't say that in reverse.
We're all part of your community.
We all play a role in keeping our community safe.
So protect your everyday.
If you see something suspicious, say something to local authorities.
AM 650 KGAB, Cheyenne's #1 news talk radio station. You're in tune with the Wednesday morning election wrap-up. On the phone, I have, I believe, mayoral candidate Rick Coppinger. Good morning, Rick.
Good morning, Doug. How are you this morning?
Doing well. First of all, congratulations on last night.
Thank you very much.
What are your thoughts on the general election campaign?
You know, I was shocked to only see 12,000 people, but like you said, historically, it's always a low count. It was educational. I learned a lot about what kind of work I'm going to have to do. My opponent is going to put up a good fight, and I look forward to it. And I'm shocked about John Harvey. I mean, that man, he just put his heart into that, and the other man did nothing. He didn't care. He was that sure.
Well, incumbency is a hard thing to overcome, particularly when you're talking about long-term incumbency. And Dan Zwanitzer, if I'm not mistaken, has held that seat since 2005. I believe that's true. I could be off by a year or two. But he's been there a long time. Good name recognition. His father was in the legislature. Yeah. And apparently the folks in his district must like him.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just really shocked about how it turned out. But I hope all of those incumbents, or not the incumbents, but all those challengers that didn't win don't become disheartened and come back and fight again.
Rick, speaking of incumbents, were you surprised the mayor did not do better?
No, and thankfully so.
Okay, because it lets you advance.
Say again?
Because it lets you advance to the general.
Absolutely. It's going to allow me to put my plan into place. We'll do a little bit better job of getting in with the people and talking to the people, listening to a lot more about what they have to say, how they have to say it, what they see coming up in 2021 with this COVID and industry and the shortness on taxes, what their ideas are, because this is their city. They should have a lot of say-so on where we go.
AM 650 KGAB, Cheyenne's #1 news talk radio station. Doug Randall with you with the Wednesday morning election wrap-up. If I could talk this morning, Glenn Woods will be back with you bright and early tomorrow morning with Wake Up Wyoming. On the phone, I have Cheyenne mayoral candidate Rick Coppinger. And Rick, you got nominated, but it looks like you've got a lot of work to do. Patrick Collins doing very well. How do you close the gap?
Again, spend more time out there with the community, learning a little bit more about what they want, putting my plan into writing so that more people can see exactly where we're at, what we intend to do. Showing them a real conservative style budget where we're fiscally smart about what we're doing. We're not what I think is wasting money, but that's my personal opinion. Line by line, doing an audit in our budget and coming up with one that makes sense and makes Cheyenne put money in the bank instead of taking it out. But we have to show that to the people. I think it's going to be a bigger investment on my part, both time and monetarily. Looking at what my competitor invested, looking at just what it cost him per vote, I don't think that I'm going to invest that kind of money in it. I think my words will probably be my biggest investment.
You mentioned your plan if you become elected. What are some things you'd like to do if you do become mayor?
Well, my biggest thing is, we need to improve the morale of city employees, in my personal opinion. I don't see that there's a huge happiness across the board. And I think that really plays into accidents and safety and so forth, and we really need to improve that. And there's no cost in that. I think if we have employees that are pleased with coming to work, they do a better job, they're more efficient, and that saves money, and they also help us find ways to cut that budget, but also start working a little bit more on proactive planning for our infrastructure, putting a plan in place that makes fiscal smart, if you will, fiscal sense, and keeps our roads in good shape.
Now, you mentioned roads, the eternal issue in Cheyenne. We all know it is potholes. Can we do anything about it?
We're always going to have potholes, and I don't think the issue is the potholes. I think it's the issue is how are we and what is the timeliness that we're repairing these potholes. It's one thing to have a pothole. It's another one to have a small pond in the middle of the road, and that doesn't happen overnight. So that means that pothole has sat there for a long period of time. So using what's in place and maybe a little bit more, we can be more proactive about our roads, taking better care of them in the summertime, sealing them, filling the potholes, getting a better job of that done, and then in the wintertime, just kind of trying to keep them on top, just stay on top of the roads, keep them proactively straight.
Okay, I'm speaking with Cheyenne mayoral candidate Rick Coppinger. We are taking phone calls if you have any questions or comments, 632-3323. Rick advancing in the primary election last night. Rick, maybe some people are surprised you advanced. I spoke to you on Facebook. You expected to win, am I right?
Yes, I did expect to win. I don't think you go into a race with the intentions of losing. I knew I was up against two intelligent people, but they, again, are on different spectrums of what I believe and what they believe. Mr. Collins did a great job. He had a good team behind him, as did I. My team was not as large as his, so we knew we were going to win. We just didn't know what the margin was going to be. But, you know, a win by an inch is just the same as a win by a mile.
Where do you differ with Patrick Collins? What should people think about come November 3rd when they look at the two candidates for mayor?
You know, I just don't see the city's place of being in business in competition with the businesses in Cheyenne. I don't believe the city has any rights doing that. There's supposed to be 4 roles of government. We need to stay in those 4 roles. We need to stay fiscally conservative. I mean, we need to put our money away so that we have it when we have these rainy days like we've had here recently. I guess more of the COVID debacle would be more of a snowstorm or a blizzard, if you will, than a rain. But we need to make sure that the money stays in the bank, that we're not competing against the private sector. They're the ones that are supposed to be in business. They're the ones that make business work. And I think that's really the differences between...
AM 650, KGAB, keeping an eye on Wyoming weather 24/7 at KGAB.com or on your mobile with Radio Pup on the App Store or Google Play.
AM 650 KGAB, Cheyenne's #1 news talk radio station. On the phone with me, I have Rick Coppinger, nominee, one of 2 nominees for mayor of Cheyenne, coming out of the primary election yesterday. Rick, it's no surprise to anybody. It's a weird year with COVID-19 and everything. You couldn't run a traditional campaign. What's it like campaigning in the year of COVID?
You know, I'm very fortunate that I have some very incredible friends that are social media savvy, and thank goodness for that, because I'm not a big social media guru. So it's been a lot like that. I am a very outgoing person. I like to meet people face to face. I had problems knocking on doors just out of respect for people and their fears for COVID. I don't have that same fear, but I do respect and understand that. So we went out and walked miles and put out cards, and didn't get quite to talk to some people. But we've got a new plan in place where I get to do what I do best, and that's talk.
So tell us about your new plan.
Well, I plan to spend a lot of time with veterans organizations, as I'm a veteran myself, and talking with them, because Cheyenne is a veteran city. We have the Air Force Base here, and those really we need to hear their opinion on how is Cheyenne doing? How are we doing for our veterans? How are we doing for the young men and women that are just coming here with this Adopt a Troop and things like that? How can we better produce, or how can we bring them in, be more welcoming, at the same time, hear what they have to say and maybe grow that direction. Also, I plan to do a lot more forums, meet the candidate, if you will, in the 5 different sections of town that I like to think of them as, North Cheyenne, South Cheyenne, East, West, and downtown, because they're all very, very important sections, not one more and less important than the other. So I think we just need to sit down and spend more time conversing with them and getting out what really are their concerns and maybe their ideas on how we can fix those concerns.
Now, when you're talking about candidate forums, do you mean virtual forums, or do you mean physically going out there and talking to people?
I plan to physically go out there and talk to them. We can do, those that wish to social distance, I would honor them and say, hey, we'll do that. And those that want to wear a mask, I would encourage them to do that. I'm all about freedoms, personal freedoms. Do what you feel is most comfortable for you. But we need to see eye to eye, and I don't believe you can tell a person over social media without being able to see in their eyes and hear the earnest in their voice. I think body gestures, I think voice inflections. I think all of that has a lot to do with how this campaign's going to turn out for me.
Now, Rick, as you well know, these are hard times economically. We've been a little better off here in Laramie County than some other areas of the state, but nonetheless, the city's not exactly awash in money. They did lay off 17 folks here in the last few months. Two-part question. One, do you anticipate more layoffs? And part two, where do you think we can cut?
I would hope not any more layoffs. I don't foresee that having to happen. I think we can go into the budget and with just again, we have to make a budget that actually makes fiscal sense, that we're not putting money where it doesn't belong. And I think we can save jobs that way. And we can sit down with the employees and come up with ideas where, look, let's keep you employed. Let's make things happen. What do you see? What do we need to do? And what are you willing to put into it?
Okay, a couple of items that do actually cost some money. The Ice and Event Center. Do you foresee trying to sell it or shut it down or run it, or what are you going to do with it?
The city has no business being in business. I would not shut it down. I would put it up for sale. If the building just sits there, there's nobody in it, there's nobody maintaining it, it has a tendency to become dilapidated or start falling apart. So empty buildings don't do any good. Making some money is better than making no money at all, but no. As mayor, I foresee putting that up for sale just as quick as we can so we can put it into the hands of the private sector and it start making money, and that's taxes that go back into our coffers.
How about the Cheyenne Civic Center? Just reopened. What are your thoughts on that?
Again, it's a competition with the new Lincoln Way Forum. I think that we could do something more private sector, public sector collaboration and make that work.
How about the Downtown Development Authority? Is that money well spent or not?
I'd have to wait and see. Amber Ash seems to have a pretty good firm hold on that. She's doing her due diligence, looking at other sections of town, and her ideas are actually very functional. We might be able to bring some of those funds back in, but I would want to sit down and have a discussion with Amber and see what can we do differently.
So looking at the budget as a whole, where could we cut if cuts need to be made? And where couldn't we cut? What's absolutely off the table as far as cuts?
Oh, personal safety, fire departments, police departments, sanitation, infrastructure. Those are absolutely off the table. Those are a must. I would never in a million years ever conceive the idea of taking funding away from our police departments. I think they could reallocate funds differently. But that's a conversation that would need to be had. Not taking money away from them, just reallocating it. The fire department, of course, we need to make sure that they're well funded. But that's what they have the contract agreements for. That's why we're constantly going back to the table with them, because they do get their dues. We need to live up to the promises with the fire department that we have made in the past also. Streets, alleys, that's what people come here for. So we can't take and cut any of that. So we need to look at something more internal. And I don't have exactly all those numbers. I'm sitting in my car at the moment. But I'm thinking there are a lot of areas that we can cut that don't deal with the full roles of government, that we can put that money back in our coffers. The sale of the Ice and Event Center would put money back in there. Maybe sit down and talk with some people that are a little wiser than I are on real estate happenings that are going on, the Belleville Ranch and so forth. Where does that play? What does it look like over the next 30 years of that lease? Would it be beneficial for us to keep it or to sell it? I know it's making $1 million a year. That doesn't necessarily mean it's something we should keep, because that is private industry again. And should we be competing with private industry when we could be making property taxes and so forth off of it?
Rick, any last thoughts for our listeners this morning? What do you want people to think about when they think about the mayoral campaign and who to vote for?
Well, I want you to think about that. One, I've not been in office. My track record has spoke for itself over my 2 elections. I know I didn't win the first time I ran, or I didn't win when I ran for candidacy. But the one thing that has never, ever changed is that we need to be fiscal conservative, and that's exactly where we're going to go. We're going to put the money back where it belongs, in the hands of the taxpayers in the city. I owe everybody a great debt of gratitude. All 12,000 people that went out and voted, a little bit more than that, but not much. Because if it weren't for them, we wouldn't be where we are now, and we wouldn't be the greatest country in the world. I want them to understand that it is all about personal freedom. It is all about the Constitution, the federal and the state, and it is all about conservatism, putting things back in place the way it's supposed to be. And I'm the man that's going to do that for you.
So you're running as a conservative then?
Absolutely.
Okay. Rick, I do appreciate your time this morning.
Doug, thank you very much for having me. And again, Cheyenne, thank you very much for what you've done. And we'll talk to you later, Rick. Have a good day.
Have a good day. AM 650 KGAB, Cheyenne's #1 news talk radio station. We do have Patrick Collins scheduled for this morning at about 9:30 also, so we'll be hearing his take on it and what he thinks. Of course, he was the other person advancing in the primary yesterday. Coming up here at about 8:05, we should have Sarah Burlingame, House District 44 representative. She was renominated without opposition yesterday. She does face a fall campaign in that district. Coming up at 8:30, we'll hear from Linda Heath, incumbent Laramie County Commissioner. She's not on the ballot, but we'll get her thoughts on what she thinks about the results from yesterday, where we go from here, what does it mean from Laramie County. As a Republican, what did you think of some of the results in the Republican Party? Those are things we'll be chatting with Linda Heath about coming up here at about 8:30. In the meantime, we do have time for a quick call if you have something on your mind. 632-3323 or 632-6500. If not, we'll go into a top-of-the-hour information break here in about 2 minutes, and we'll be hearing the latest on the weather, get an update with Joy Greenwald on our news, and all of that sort of thing. Network news, we'll hear about the nomination of Joseph Biden to be president of the United States. Wyoming has not voted Democratic in a presidential election since 1964. I think most people think it won't happen this year either, but what do you think his impact will be on races in Wyoming? Will he get Democrats to turn out? Will he not? Does it matter? Do people vote? Do you think people in Wyoming vote based on the top of the ticket, or do you think they vote more strictly on local issues and candidates? Those are all some things to think about on this post-primary election day, Wednesday on AM 650 KGAB. By the way, Glenn Woods will be back with you bright and early tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. with Wake Up Wyoming, and I'll be with you again on Saturday from 11 to 1 with the Weekend in Wyoming program. Not sure who we're going to have on yet this week, but we'll certainly have some guests lined up as always. We've had some great interviews on that show. I'd like to encourage everybody to tune in if you haven't had a chance to tune in. By the way, of course, right in front of Weekend in Wyoming, we have Nick the Midas Guy, one of our most popular programs, and his Saturday Night Cruise has really taken off. That's something that he really got out in front of and has just been a great event for Cheyenne. I know that other people like Rick Coppinger were involved in that as well, and certainly it's something that has taken off and been a great event for the city of Cheyenne. AM 650 KGAB, Cheyenne's #1 news talk radio station. Coming up on a top-of-the-hour news and information break. Then we'll speak with Representative Sarah Burlingame, get a Democratic point of view on the results yesterday and the election going forward. What does she think about it? What does she think about her race? What does she think about the state in general? Some of the incumbents losing yesterday. Those are all things we'll be chatting with Sarah about coming up here at about 8:05. You're in tune with Cheyenne's #1 news talk radio station, AM 650 KGAB. Good to have you along here on the Wednesday morning wrap-up for the 2020 primary election, AM 650. AM 650 KGAB, you're in tune with the Wednesday morning election wrap-up. On the phone, I have, I believe, House District 44 Representative Sarah Burlingame. Good morning, Sarah.
Good morning. I'm here. I believe I'm here.
Okay. Was it a late night last night for you, or?
It was a real late night. Yeah, I was waiting on some, returns, and yeah, it was an odd night.
Well, we appreciate you calling in this morning. Of course, you were renominated yesterday. You do have an opponent in the fall. What do you think of the upcoming campaign? What do you want to talk about during the campaign?
I mean, I want to talk about jobs. I want to talk about, this economic moment that we're finding ourselves in. I'm real proud of Laramie County. I feel like Laramie County had some pretty stark choices. We had some real far-right extremists who didn't have any actual ideas about, how to solve this economic crisis or how to work with people and, get things done, but a lot of invective. And they didn't make it through, so it makes me feel like Laramie County took, a good hard look at the candidates and decided that we needed to, move people in who had some experience, who are ready to work, with everybody at the table.
Now, Sarah, as I'm sure you know, a lot of incumbents, quite a few anyway, losing yesterday. How will this affect the Wyoming legislature, or will it?
It's a real shakeup. I mean, I have to tell you, like, Tyler Lindholm, who was the majority whip, was, he is a friend of mine, and he was just a real force in the House. It's hard to imagine the House without him. Just, somebody who could bring people together. And I guess that's my fear is, did we get it right? Did people elect people who know how to work and find solutions and make unpopular decisions, or did we just find people who were happy to burn it all down and vote no against everything?
Well, and as I think we all know, we face a tough budget situation. How do you think the results yesterday will impact what we do going forward to deal with the budget?
Well, I mean, we just lost some people who were very thoughtful and very good, at what they do. My chairman, Dan Kirkbride, Michael Von Flatern up in Gillette, just some people who are just leaders in the legislature, and people look to them because they do have such a depth and breadth of knowledge, and it's hard to lose that, Having said that, I'm myself, like everybody else, is ready to work with, whoever gets through, and I certainly hope and plan to win my election and try to do my best to work for Laramie County.
Let's talk about your election. What are some differences between yourself and your opponent, Mr.
Romero Martinez?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, here's... I went up to the governor had a 3-gun shoot up in Cody, at the Cody shooting complex a couple weekends ago. And the Wyoming team was fielded by myself and Representative Yen from Teton County and Representative Washut from Natrona County. We did okay. We came in above Utah. But when I was there, that Park County race with Representative Newsom, it was nasty. It was bitter.
Heard that.
It was real ugly. And I mean, I came back from that kind of shaken, like, good gravy. And so, Mr. Romero Martinez is my neighbor, and I just walked over to his house and knocked on the door and said, I don't plan to do anything like that against you.
Uh-huh.
We just stood on, his front lawn and had a conversation, and I was having a tamale party over at Lincoln Park, for the campaign, and I invited him over. We have very, very different ideas in terms of policy, in terms of, platforms, but he's not a bad person, and that this really ugly, divisive campaigning that we've seen in Wyoming just recently, like, they're not going to see it in our race.
Well, we saw some of that in the Bouchard Johnson race. That got pretty contentious.
Yeah, it was disappointing, but it also wasn't surprising, right? I mean, ducks quack.
Now, of course, Anthony Bouchard did win with 52% of the vote. He faces Brittany Wallish in the November general election. Do you think a tough primary like that is going to make him more vulnerable, or no?
I think it's going to make him more vulnerable, and I think that I sound like a boxing commentator, Doug. Like, Brittany's at her best when she is, underestimated, and you should not underestimate Brittany Wallace. She's ready to win. I think, she grew up in that neighborhood. She feels really passionately about representing her district, and that her district deserves to be represented with integrity and, with democratic principles. And I don't think they've had that, for the last 4 years. And I think people are ready for it.
How do you think the nomination of Joe Biden will impact Wyoming politically in November, if it will?
Sorry, I was getting another call in. How do I believe what will impact?
How do you feel the nomination of Joe Biden will affect politics here in the general election in Wyoming, if it will?
Yeah, it's hard for me to tell. I mean, I think folks were real animated against Hillary Clinton in a way that they won't be against Joe Biden. I mean, we've been pretty solidly Trump country. I don't know if that holds with, the economy and just an understanding that how this president and this administration has handled, this pandemic is less than ideal. And I think there's some loss of support there. But, I'm a pragmatist, too. Like, I understand that, most of my neighbors voted for this president.
AM 650 KGAB, you're in tune with the KGAB Wednesday morning election wrap-up. On the phone, I have House District 44 Democratic Representative Sarah Burlingame. We've been chatting about some of the legislative results. Sarah, do you think that there is really an anti-incumbent mood, or do you think the incumbents who lost yesterday were mostly due to local factors, or both?
I think that the GOP in Wyoming is wrestling, for the soul of its party, and I think that there are folks who really want to see the old live and let live, get the best person for the job, get pragmatists, at the table, is under attack, and I think maybe Republican leadership has been slow to realize that, they may not be in charge anymore, and it might be these pretty far-right extremists.
Now, in terms of federal offices, we have among major party candidates...
More women!
Yes, I was going to go there. What do you think about that?
Well, hallelujah. No better way to celebrate, the national 100th year of suffrage. Of course, Wyoming's 150, where we acknowledge women's right to vote. Fantastic, right? I mean, Lynette Grable, Marev Ben David, Representative Congresswoman Cheney, and Cynthia Lummis. I mean, what a field.
Are you surprised?
No, actually, I mean, when I looked at, the field of candidates, I thought that's who would come through. But I think a lot of us were, slow to, coalesce that, oh, hey, we are going to have 4 women in the equality state. And I think people, kind of underestimated Lynette Grable as well. I mean, she really went all out there. I mean, she had endorsements from Congresswoman Havland and, just pretty much every Democrat in the state. Real aggressive grassroots campaigning. It was great to see.
For those who are not familiar with Lynette Grable, tell us a little bit about her.
So Lynette Grable is a community organizer. She lives in Wind River. I think she's in Fort Washakie or Riverton, and Northern Arapahoe, and kind of cut her teeth organizing in the missing murdered Indigenous women movement. Was working down in New Mexico doing Protect Our Daughters, work. So things that are just now kind of coming into the, people's understanding. She's been working on those issues for a really long time. She's got 3 great kids. She's a very faithful woman, just really passionate about Wyoming and how to make, a better future for women and kids and everybody.
And
a neat woman.
I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe she's the first ever Native American nominee for a congressional seat in Wyoming, at least among major parties.
Yeah, she's already broken a record there. Yeah.
This year also, I believe, will be the first time we have a female U.S. Senator from Wyoming, no matter how it comes out.
That's exactly right. Yeah. It took us a while.
Sarah,
we got there.
Sarah, do you think the influx of women in important political positions, what sort of impact do you think that has? What does it mean?
I mean, it's always better to have representation. It's always better to have people who will be impacted by the legislation that you creating it, right? I mean, not just in your legislature, but like on your boards, on your committees, on your commissions, on your church board, wherever it is, you want the leadership to reflect the community that you serve. And if your leadership doesn't reflect that, if it only reflects, one type of person, then it's going to be skewed. And Cynthia Lummis gave a talk to those of us who had been endorsed by the Cowgirl Run Fund, which is a PAC that is working to get more women elected in Wyoming. And she said that just as a sort of general rule, something that she had seen, and I think it was one of our former governors who had passed this along to her, was that men tended to vote for the next election, and women tended to think more generationally, like, how is this going to affect my community at large? And it's a generalization, but, you see that, there is a benefit always to having women in decision-making seats of power.
Okay, I'm speaking with House District 44 Representative Sarah Burlingame. By the way, if you have any questions or comments, phone lines are open, 632-3323. Sarah, I'm not telling you anything you don't know when I tell you that Democrats have been a small minority in the Wyoming legislature for some time. Are you hopeful of picking up some seats this election?
I am, yeah. I mean, I think we have some pretty amazing candidates. And, you've been watching this probably better and longer than I have, Doug, but, some years you get a ton of candidates, across the state, but that it's the longest long shot, for any of them to make it through. And this year I feel like we didn't field as many races, but the races that we are fielding, we've got solid candidates, people who are just smart, passionate, want to serve their community. And I guess that's the other thing, too, is I think if you look at our Democratic candidates like Marcy Kindred, in House District 8, or Brittany Wallish, Amy Speaker, or Jackie Grimes, Lindsay over in Rock Springs, and Trey Sherwood and Laramie. You look at these candidates, and they're just, before they ever ran for office, the thing that people know about them is that they're just so deeply committed to their communities. They're already doing economic development. They're already doing, community renewal. And it's very easy to see, their motivation for running for office. And if you stack that against, some of the other folks, and you think, I think they're running for office because they think it's prestigious, or, it's, a feather in their cap. I think voters will see that, and I think they'll reward them.
It's going to be a tough time to be in office no matter what party you're in, though. Some tough decisions have to be made.
Yeah, at our primary watch party last night, that was the question that people kept asking, was are you sure you want this? This isn't a great job. There's going to be so much pain attached to, our budget simply cannot continue the way it has. Energy will not keep paying our bills. It just won't. That's just a fact. And that means really hard decisions, but that pain is also an opportunity. Like, this is where we get to define ourselves and say, we can create something better for our future, for our kids, for their kids, if we make good, hard choices right now. So I guess there is still that excitement about the opportunity that, our grandkids could look back and say, oh man, I'm so glad they made good choices and we elected good people, because Wyoming really turned the corner. It could have been really dark days for us, but, the people who needed to saw us through.
Okay, I'm gonna put you on the spot here. Do we need a state income tax?
We might. Yeah. I mean, it's not off the table for me. An income tax doesn't. This is. I think you probably know this. This is the sad thing. An income tax is not a silver bullet. I mean, whether we have one or don't have one. I mean, it's the same with some of these radical ideas about, cutting all state workers. You cut every single state job, we still have a deficit. Energy has paid our bills. Every Wyoming citizen should, know that we pay $2,000 in taxes, and in return, we get over $30,000 worth of services. That has been subsidized by energy taxation. It is no longer going to be subsidized at that rate, at that level. So what do we want to do? Do we want to just shrivel down to nothing? Or do we want to invest in ourselves? And do we want to do some things that will attract businesses? Because we don't necessarily need more people to move to Wyoming. We need high-paying jobs to move to Wyoming. And high-paying jobs don't like moving places that don't have non-discrimination, that don't have hate crimes, that are considered to be backwards and unwilling to adapt to a new economy. Wyoming doesn't have to do that, right? I mean, we could be bold. We could make hard choices and say, please, move your business here. Move your business with your high-paying jobs here. We have an educated workforce. We will protect your workers. We'll protect their families. That could be Wyoming's future. But people need to elect people who will vote for that. And people need to be a little bit more bold in their vision for what Wyoming could be.
So I would infer that you see a statewide non-discrimination law then as an economic development issue.
Absolutely, 1,000%. I'm not sure what non-discrimination looks like, honestly, after Bostock opinion. I think we have federal non-discrimination now. I mean, we have it at the federal level. That was what the Bostock decision gave us. It might just be a matter of updating our statutes so that our statutes reflect what the law is. And the last time we, attempted to do that, we had the Sundance Massacre that just went so far off the rails with extreme right rhetoric. And, it shut it down. It shut it down, and as a result, we now have statutes on the books that do not match our laws, and we have a lot of politicians who are afraid to stick their necks out. So I don't think this election helped that much, but we'll see.
Now, you mentioned the Sundance Massacre. Tell us what you're referring to.
So in 2017, there was a Gender Statutes Update Bill, and that bill did a couple of things. Our legislative service offices, they are tasked with telling the legislature when statutes don't match the laws on the books. They don't direct us what to do, but they say, heads up, like, legislature, you need to address this. Like, this doesn't match. And so what they decided to do was go through and just kind of address the most glaring ones. So, for instance, our statutes never anticipated that women would be in law enforcement. They never anticipated that women would be in firefighting department. So all of our statutes refer to male law enforcement, and they refer, like in death benefits, to their wives. But, of course, if a firefighter is female, if law enforcement is female, usually she doesn't have a wife. She has a husband. And in our statutes, there are no death benefits that can accrue to a husband. They only accrue to wives because we didn't conceive of women serving in those positions. So that was something that we just wanted to update to reflect our new reality. Similarly, with same-sex marriage, the statutes say that, marriage is only conceptualized as being between one man and one woman, and yet same-sex marriage is legal, right? And so everything that accrues from that through adoption and surrogacy and divorce, we just needed to update our statutes so that it reflected what the law was. But unfortunately, that's not what happened. What happened was some pretty far-right groups got a hold of it, and they descended on Sundance, even though the bill had pretty easily, because it didn't create any new law, right? It wasn't creating a new law. It was just saying our statutes will reflect what the law currently is. People were so heavily and deeply misinformed that they said, this gender statute update would create gay marriage, which, of course, it didn't. That's not a thing that it can do. And my colleague, Representative Connolly, who's the House Minority Leader, just sat there and had to take a lot of abuse that went unchecked by the folks who were giving testimony. They referred to her as vile and disgusting. They spoke to her and about her with contempt, and it was just a low point for decorum in the Wyoming legislature.
Sarah, we're just about out of time. Any last thoughts for our listeners this morning?
Well, I'm really grateful for all the folks who came out and participated. I thought that Laramie County really got it right, and there was a high level of participation. When we work together, we really do good things, and I'm grateful for everyone who voted for me, and I look forward to earning your vote in the general election on November 3rd.
Sarah, I appreciate your time this morning. Thank you for calling in.
Thanks so much, Doug. Have a great day.
Talk to you later.
Okay.
AM 650 KGAB going into a bottom of the hour news and information break. AM 650 KGAB, Cheyenne's #1 news talk radio station. On the phone, I believe I have Laramie County Commissioner Linda Heath. Good morning, Linda.
Good morning, Doug.
So we'll cut right to the chase. What do you make of yesterday's election results? What can we learn from it?
Well, I was just trying to figure out a way to kind of express what I was thinking about some of the statewide races, particularly in the House and Senate. We have the same problem, the budget. The problems didn't change. Some of the faces now that are going to be dealing with it have changed. I think it's going to be a question as to how fast that they get up to speed on the budget. And granted, this isn't a budget session coming up, but I know that budget is going to take a huge, huge front seat going forward. So that's going to be interesting. Something else that I picked up on and looking at some of the statewide races, a former governor did endorse some candidates, and those candidates lost, which I found kind of interesting. But I think, overall, we've shuffled a few chairs around in the House and the Senate, and how that will eventually affect what comes out of the legislature this next session is anybody's guess as to what's going to happen.
Linda, as you know, a lot of incumbents, or at least several incumbents in the legislature lost. What do you attribute that to?
I think it kind of tends to be those incumbents that lost, I think, were in areas where perhaps there was a pretty hotly contested race. And I hate to say it, but it's a kind of a tendency of incumbents to think, well, I'm going to get reelected. And I've always been told if you're in a race for a public office, you always run like you're losing. And that may be been part of the issue, is that some of the candidates, the incumbents, got a little bit lazy in their campaigning. It also may have been an issues thing. People have been a little more inclined to want to vote up or down on an incumbent based on maybe one or two votes that they made while they were in office. That's kind of scary because the body of work isn't always just one or two votes. I mean, there's hundreds of bills that they vote on every session. And just focus in on one or two votes really isn't fair to the incumbent, but I understand why people do it, because the issues that maybe they're focused in on are the ones that are the most important to them, and it's not the other 98 or however many votes that particular individual made.
Now, Linda, as you know, there's been something of, I'll say, a disagreement within the Republican Party the last few months. Frontier Republicans on one side, some other folks considering themselves maybe more conservative on the other side. Do you think that was a factor?
It could have been. I think up in Campbell County we probably saw a lot of that. But then when you start looking at some of the other races around the state where the individuals that I will say were probably more vocal on the more right-leaning side lost their races. One individual that has kind of been with that group, Bob Wharf, did win his race, but the Allreds, both Taylor and Carl, both lost their races. Joey Cornetti, who was involved in this little skirmish up there at the convention, lost his race. Yet you look at some of those, and I still think that there's a longing by many of the voters that, if you're going to be in public office, you need to be able to sit down at the table and talk to other people and not be inclined to want to pick up your toys and go home and leave the sandbox if you don't get your way. And I'm a big believer in that in order to have a legislative process at all, we've got to be able to have a conversation. And when that conversation goes away or that conversation is limited, then our legislative process suffers. So I look at that and I see where the Frontier Republican group is coming from and wanting to have more civility and being able to have that conversation to have the legislative process move forward. And in many ways, I agree with a lot of the things that the more conservative group in the Republican Party is fighting for. But at the same time, I look at their approach, and I really don't like to be told whether I agree with you or not at the behest of a baseball bat or a club that I have to agree with you. I want to make my own choice.
Do you think having a conversation about our budget got more difficult yesterday?
I think it probably did, and I say that because there's going to be enough new faces within both the House and the Senate, particularly in the House, that budget, and you talk to the legislators that have been in there and been in there for several terms, will tell you that our budget process and the way that the Wyoming budget is set up and how it's put together, how you read it, is complicated, very complicated, and I've heard that there are ways that it can be simplified, and I think probably we need to do that, even if it's just for the sake of the legislators being able to work with it and develop a budget that we can use going forward.
Well, and I can tell you from covering the legislature, trying to wade through that budget and figuring out what the heck they're talking about sometimes, it's not easy. I don't envy people that have to vote on some of the items in there. It's difficult.
It is very difficult, and then, they feel that the governor makes his proposal and the legislature makes their proposal, and then it all goes back to the governor, and the governor vetoes, and it's kind of interesting once in a while, at least I find it very interesting. You don't see the legislature really trying to flex their muscle and perhaps override a veto by the governor. They'd like to play it pretty close to the vest, and if the governor says, no, we're not going to go here, they kind of, okay, that's fine, we'll agree with you, we'll let you go your way. But rarely is the governor contested. As far as a veto is concerned.
So do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing that they don't generally challenge the governor's vetoes?
I think it can cut both ways, and it goes to where do you stand. If you support the governor's veto, it's okay, and if you don't, obviously you'd like to perhaps challenge it. So I think that it depends on what the veto is. You know, can you live with it? Is this a compromise going forward, or is this something that, you know, you want to throw yourself on the spear for? And I think that's where the legislature comes down. Is this worth picking a fight with the governor at this point because we might need his help on something else? And that's part of the legislative process as well.
And you're in tune with AM 650 KGAB, Cheyenne's #1 news talk radio station. Our Wednesday morning election wrap-up. On the phone, I have Laramie County Commissioner Linda Heath. And Linda, as I know you're well aware, on the commission on the Republican side, 2 incumbents winning. They do face a Democratic candidate in November, but looks like we might have some continuity there. Is that a good thing, a bad thing, or no opinion?
Well, you know, we've got Brian Lovett coming in basically as the new commissioner at this point in time. He's still very much in learning about the commission and what we do, and he's got a lot of, strong background in various portions of county government. He's got some state experience with having worked with DEQ, and he's been on a lot of local boards. He's also serving in a lot of different capacities with several community organizations. So he comes in with a real big, I guess you could say, resume of experience that he's bringing to the board. Commissioner Holmes, if there ever was, in my mind, a gentleman on the commission, it's got to be Buck. He's the old ranch cowboy that, he tries to give people credit for different beliefs, and yeah, he's a pretty conservative guy out there, and I really have enjoyed working with both Buck and Brian. And going forward, I think some of the issues that the commissioners are going to be facing, and the budget, of course, is going to be one of those things that we're all going to be watching very closely, and it's going to be dependent largely on the economy and how fast we can get it to come back. Also, what the state does. We're watching that direct distribution that could possibly be cut from the legislature. It's $105 million right now, but that's divided between all the local governments and municipalities across the state. Laramie County only ends up with a little over $2 million of that, so it's spread out pretty thin. But it is something that we do, to some degree, depend upon, and I know that the city depends upon that a great deal. Which is part of the municipal tax discussion that the city municipalities and WHAM have gotten into with the commissioners and across the state, and also the legislature in this last session. We had some really good candidates. We had some candidates that nobody had ever heard of before. One of their biggest challenges was going to be name recognition. You had youth in there that, he's got a lot to learn. As pretty brave of him at the age of 20 to step up to the plate and run for public office. And I think probably I heard it said once by an individual that if I was 20 years old, would I even have the courage to do that? Much less put my name in the plate, and could I do it? Could I have done it at 30 or 35? Well, it's a question that we all could ask ourselves, and it was kind of impressive that he would go ahead and do that. But, I think going forward, the continuity is going to be a good thing with the commission, because we do have some things that we are working on that I'm sure all of us would like to have our hands in the pot and working on those solutions.
Linda, are we looking at inevitable cuts going forward or not?
At this point in time, I think as far as the county is concerned, we'll probably hold steady. We're looking at those ad valorem taxes and what they could be this next tax season coming up beginning in January. We are seeing some additional oil activity coming back in the county. It's limited, but you watch that price of the barrel of oil down in Texas and on those markets, and when it drops down, those guys kind of go, should we be opening up these wells and starting to pump again? And it's something that we're all going to be watching. Now, Laramie County, the commissioner's thought process on the oil is as fast as it comes, it can go. So we have really taken the steps to take that money that we are getting from the oil and setting it back, because it becomes part of our reserves, and it's something that we watch very closely. We don't want to become dependent upon that revenue, and then when it goes away, say, oh my gosh, why didn't we save that money? So, yeah, that's something to watch. And you know, we're looking at businesses coming into Wyoming. Laramie County really has been very blessed in that the Leeds organization and the chamber, and particularly Leeds, have been very active in recruiting a variety of businesses to Laramie County that have helped with our tax base. And as you know, the energy has kind of ebbed and flowed, and the rest of the state maybe has suffered because of that. Laramie County, in a lot of ways, has been insulated from that. So, you know, hats off to Leeds and the work that they have done. I know Commissioner Holmes has been very active in the economic development side, working with Leeds and helping get some businesses in to the county and encouraging businesses, particularly from Colorado, and coming in.
Linda, as far as local government here, what's it like to be a candidate on the ballot? Is it nerve-wracking?
Well, you know, I think it is, and, you know, it is for any candidate, because you put your name out there, you pay your $25 filing fee, and then you put good money into campaign signs, and you put your sweat equity into getting out and meeting the public, and it's always I guess it's kind of a popularity contest. You think about who was elected prom queen and king, and it kind of goes that direction, but there's a little higher stake than being the prom king and queen, obviously. To those candidates that ran and didn't win their races yesterday, you put your name on the ballot, you stepped up, you volunteered to be a leader. Don't go home and lick your wounds on the sofa. You know, take a deep breath, but stay involved, stay engaged, get involved with some civic organizations, learn more about your community. There will be another time that you can step up to the plate perhaps and put your name on the ballot. But take the lessons that you learned from this election, and if you do decide to run again, apply those lessons. You know, I encourage every one of the individuals that maybe didn't come out on top in the primary yesterday to do that. You volunteered to be a leader. Don't step back and decide that you're not going to be involved in the community, because people voted for you. They thought you would make a good leader.
AM 650 KGAB are in tune with the Wednesday morning election wrap-up for the 2020 primary election. On the phone, I have Laramie County Commissioner Linda Heath. Linda, what do you think we can learn from the results yesterday, or can we learn anything?
Yeah, I was kind of interested in looking at the city council races here. There's several individuals that have run before. We had incumbents, not so recent incumbents in Richard Johnson, that ran, people that have run for other offices, as in Boyd Wiggum, who's run for county commissioner, running now for council. And I look at the way that different individuals may have campaigned. I'm not sure that having the most signs did any good for some of them. You know, Tom Seagrave, I don't think I saw but maybe one of his campaign signs. But he has name recognition from the fact that he's been in Cheyenne, he's been on the council. You know, Karen Meister Emmerich had signs out. I think she probably ran a pretty low-key campaign. And there again, COVID, I think, kind of tempered a lot of that. Nobody really quite knew how to deal with it. We got on social, you saw a lot of them on social media. You know, WTE did question and answers with them, but really there were only two forums, and that was the one with the League of Women Voters and the one with the Chamber. And I think the candidates in a lot of ways struggled with, how do I get my message out? And that, I think, is going to be a question going forward into the general for some of them, especially those that are maybe the lesser-known candidates that don't maybe have the name recognition that some of the candidates do. It'll be a challenge, and I'm watching it with interest because in 2 years we're going to have another election. And will we still be looking at the same impacts of COVID and social distancing? I hope to God we aren't. Or will we be able to return maybe to more of the in-person contact that candidates are used to using during an election season?
You mentioned the Cheyenne City elections, Patrick Collins finishing way out in front in the mayoral election. Does he have it in the bag?
You know, if you look at the percentages, you know, he was running, 60%, Coppinger with 21, Marion with 19. Even if you take Marion's at 19 and add it to Coppinger's at 21, you're not coming up to 60%. However, there is a question here that I have that I think is going to affect a lot of races going into the general, and could probably have affected a lot of races in the primary. How many undervotes were there? And that means when you have a ticket where you can vote, you know, up to 3 candidates or up to 2 candidates or whatever, how many people says, well, I'm only going to vote for one? And that's not illegal. This was, you know, you can do that. So let's go into the general and say they look at Coppinger and they look at Collins and they say, you know, I can't vote for either one, and they don't vote. And I think that we've got some races here in Laramie County that may actually be impacted by some undervotes coming into the general election.
What are some of those races?
I'm not so sure, but what Senate District 6 could possibly be one of those.
And that's, I believe, Anthony Bouchard.
Yes.
That was quite a, I guess we'll say, a spirited primary. Do you think that makes it more difficult to win a general election?
No, I don't think it makes it more difficult to have a spirited primary to win a general election. To some degree, I think it's good because it definitely brings out a contrast between candidates. But I'm not sure that maybe whether Aaron Johnson's candidates will translate and vote for. Then the other question is if they don't vote for Bouchard, would they be willing to jump over to the Democrat ticket and vote for Brittany Wallish? That remains to be seen.
So do you think that's a potential upset there, Linda?
What's that?
Do you think that might be a potential upset?
I think it could be interesting in a lot of ways. It'll be interesting to see how they campaign against each other.
Wyoming news, newsmakers, and more. Join Doug Randall with Wyoming This Weekend, Saturday mornings at 11 on AM 650 KGAB.
Hey, that would be me, and I would like to invite you to be sure and join us. We try and do some interesting local interviews. We really do emphasize the local, and that comes your way every Saturday from 11 to 1. AM 650 KGAB, Cheyenne's #1 news talk radio station. Looks like we have some open phone time right at the moment, 632-6500, 632-3323. We've been focusing on the election. We do have Patrick Collins, Cheyenne mayoral candidate, scheduled for about 9:30, and we'll be speaking with Laramie County Clerk Deborah Lee at about 9:45. In the meantime, if you have anything on your mind, feel free to give us a call here at 632-6500, 632-3323. I think maybe the big news really was the anti-incumbent mood, particularly in the legislature. A lot of incumbents losing, some of them really getting trounced. Some of the incumbents who lost included Senator Michael Von Flattern losing in Campbell County, and he lost rather badly. That was something like 62-38, the Second Amendment. I think the big issue up there, he was attacked on the basis of not being sufficiently pro-gun. He responded that he voted on issues on an individual basis and that he's not anti-gun at all. In fact, he posed with, I believe it was a shotgun, if I remember right. It turned out not to be enough, however, and he did lose to Troy McCown. That margin was like 62-38. We had Tyler Lindholm losing in House District 1. Now, that was a pretty close race. He lost to Chip Neiman roughly, I think it's 53-47. Nonetheless, and he was the House Minority Whip, so he was not just some Joe on the floor. He was actually someone in a position of authority. He did lose. Maybe his signature legislation was the Wyoming Food Freedom Act, and he'll be on the sidelines at least for 2 years on the Wyoming legislature. We had several other. Dan Kirkbride lost. We had Representative Northrup, who was trying to move up into the Wyoming Senate to replace Hank Coe of Cody. He lost, although technically he wasn't incumbent because he was running for a new office. But nonetheless, he was a name that of someone who had been in the legislature who now will not be in the legislature because he lost the election. Those are just some of the races. Here in Laramie County, incumbent legislators faring a bit better. Raffi Ellis was victorious despite facing a challenge from Dan Young. Dan Zwanitzer, of course, the longtime representative from Laramie County. He actually faced a pretty energetic opponent. Didn't matter that much. He was able to breeze through pretty cleanly, and he'll be back in the Wyoming House of Representatives. He's had that seat, I think, since 2005, and I need to research that, but I know it's been a good long time. And Anthony Bouchard, in what was perhaps the most spirited local race, turned back a challenge from Aaron Johnson. Aaron Johnson was endorsed by former Governor Matt Mead. Laramie County Sheriff Danny Glick endorsed her also on social media, and she ran a close race. However, Senator Bouchard comes out with a 52-48 win. He will be facing Brittany Walsh, the Democrat, in the November general election. And so I guess as far as legislative candidates, it turns out that our local legislative candidates were able to turn back some challenges. That wasn't necessarily the case, not as much anyway, statewide. Another person who lost, Bill Pownell, up in Campbell County. Bill Pownell, former sheriff up there. And he also was defeated for re-election. There were several others in the legislature who did lose. Probably the big news here locally, Cheyenne Mayor Marion Orr apparently defeated in her bid for a second term. She fell about 300 votes behind Rick Coppinger in the race for the second nomination for the mayor of Cheyenne for the November general election ballot. Patrick Collins, the former Cheyenne City Councilman and longtime businessman, who we expect to have on the air here at about 9:33. He finished way out in front in that race. I think he got about 8,500 votes. Rick Coppinger got about 2,900. Mayor Orr got about 2,600, if I am recalling correctly. So certainly you have to think that Patrick Collins has a nice cushion going into that November election. But again, I think our turnout will be much higher. Generally in Wyoming in presidential election years, you get a turnout of 60% plus. Our turnout was considerably below that yesterday, so you'll probably have a lot of new voters coming in. Nonetheless, Rick Coppinger, in hoping to win that race, will have to probably win most of those new voters and hope to win most of the voters who also voted for Mayor Orr, and hope he can make up the difference, because he's facing a bit of a mountain there. We spoke to him earlier this morning. He's pretty confident he can do it. He says he's going to emphasize his conservative credentials, the fact that he doesn't believe that the city should be in business with things like the Ice and Events Center or the Civic Center. He says that separates him from Patrick Collins. We'll talk to Mr. Collins here in about 15, 20 minutes and get his take on that. We also have Laramie County Clerk Deborah Lee calling in about 9:45. We'll talk about turnout, how the voting went and all that sort of thing. AM 650 KGAB, Cheyenne's #1 news talk radio station. Right now we do have open...
Early riser, don't miss This Morning with Gordon Deal, covering news, politics, the markets, personal finance, and more. Weekday mornings at 4 on AM 650 KGAB.
And you're in tune with AM 650 KGAB, the Wednesday morning Wyoming primary election wrap-up coming up here in about 15 minutes. We do have mayoral nominee Patrick Collins scheduled to call in, coming up at about 9:45. We will hear from Laramie County Clerk Deborah Lee. In the meantime, if you have anything on your mind, feel free to give us a call. Here is 632-6500, 632-3323. What are your thoughts on the results yesterday? Were you surprised, not surprised, pleased, disappointed? What do you attribute the anti-incumbent mood in the legislature to? So many incumbent lawmakers losing, some of them pretty close races, but others not so much that way. I mean, Michael Von Flattern up in Campbell County absolutely getting trounced, and he'd been in the legislature for quite some time. We spoke earlier this morning with Glenn Woods. He of course, used to work in Gillette. Glenn said that Senator Von Flattern had run as a Democrat and an independent a few times before being elected as a Republican. Nonetheless, he'd been in the legislature for a good while, I think a couple terms at least. I'd have to look that up, but I know he'd been there for a while. And he lost by a pretty sizable margin. The Second Amendment, I understand, was the big issue in that campaign, from following it from a distance on social media. Tyler Lindholm, of course, House District 1, probably best known for the Wyoming Food Freedom Act. He lost in a narrow race. I think the margin was 53-47, losing to challenger Chip Neiman. Bill Pownell, the former sheriff up in Campbell County, who had been elected to the legislature, and he was defeated. I believe, again, a more conservative challenger, if I'm not mistaken. I didn't really focus a lot on that race, but that would be my general impression. He faced a more conservative challenger and did lose in that race. We had Representative Kirkbride losing. We had Representative Northrup trying to move up to the Senate. That move was unsuccessful, and just kind of a tough day for incumbents. Now, closer to home, incumbents did a little bit better. Anthony Bouchard was renominated. He's not reelected because he does face a Democrat on the November election ballot, and we just heard County Commissioner Linda Heath speaking about that race. She doesn't think an upset there is utterly out of the question. Republicans generally have the advantage in Wyoming legislative races. He did face a pretty stiff challenge. And if I understood Linda correctly, she doesn't think that an upset there is out of the challenge against Brittany Wallish, the Democrat. That remains to be seen what will happen on that. We did have Dan Zwanitzer, the longtime Wyoming House representative from Laramie County, holding on to his seat. He really didn't even work that hard. I mean, he basically, I guess he figured, hey, they know me. If they want to, they'll vote for me. If not, they won't. That apparently worked. He breezed through pretty easily. Affie Ellis, the state senator whom we had on the air on Saturday on my program, Weekend in Wyoming, she also was able to win renomination, facing a challenge from Dan Young on the Republican side of that ballot. So no statewide officials, as in governor, secretary of state, treasurer. None of those folks were on the ballot this time. I don't know what would have happened had they been. We won't know. We did have a first in Wyoming politics, in that women were nominated for the major party nominations for both the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House of Representatives. That is something that has never happened before. That also does mean, I believe, and I haven't researched this, but I'm pretty sure I'm right, I don't think we've ever had a female U.S. Senator from Wyoming. We've had a bunch of female representatives. In fact, that's been quite common. We've had one female governor way back in the day, but I don't think we've ever had a female U.S. Senator. Good morning. You're on the air.
Oh, hi, Doug. This is Micah.
Hey, Micah. What do you think?
Well, I've got a question. Could you or one of your guests that you have on explain how much power actually the mayor has within a city? So, like, if the governor comes out with a suggestion to do something, or is even really pretty firm on something, what do the actual individual mayors have control of?
That's above. I honestly don't know, because I think it varies from city to city. Now, we did see with the state health orders here with the COVID-19 that those apparently are pretty much mandated at the state level. And my understanding on this, I'm not an attorney and I don't play one on the radio, so if I'm wrong here, somebody can correct me. But my understanding on this is that when it comes to state mandates like that, local governmental bodies can make more restrictive mandates, but they can't make it less restrictive. I do know that's the case with laws in the legislature on things like talking on your cell phone while you're driving. Now, as far as the power of a mayor, that varies from community to community. I can tell you that because, for example, Casper, which has a city manager, the mayor is mostly a ceremonial position. We here in Cheyenne have what is known as a strong mayor-city council form of government, and that means that, well, that's just what it says. Basically, you have a city executive who's the mayor, and you have the Cheyenne City Council, which is essentially the legislative branch, and that doesn't absolutely conform to what you'd find with, say, the president and the Congress, but it's along those lines. Now, if you get in some of the cities with a city manager form of government, the mayor position is basically ceremonial. I don't know if you were here a few years ago when they tried to pass a city administrator position.
Yeah, I remember that.
Had that passed, the mayor, mostly as I understood it, would have been ceremonial, sort of like the King of England. I mean, you cut ribbons and you right. Announce events, but you don't really have any particular power. That, of course, did not go through. The mayor does have more power than that. However, I don't think the mayor can impose executive orders in the same way that a president can. Now, I could be wrong on that. If somebody knows better, feel free to call me, because it's not something I know the answer to. Do you think the mayor...
because I noticed even traveling around in Wyoming, there seemed to be some areas with this COVID thing that were more lenient than others, and I really didn't know if that was because their mayor was also more lenient, or if it was just that possibly the police force in that area was just more willing to turn a blind eye as long as things weren't getting out of hand.
Now,
I would be interested to know just what the power is, and maybe Pat has the answer.
I'll ask you when he calls. My understanding,
okay, thank you, Doug.
You bet. My understanding on the COVID thing, by the way, is that a lot of it goes back to the county health officer, so that's not necessarily in the mayor's jurisdiction. But maybe we can ask Pat Collins about that when he calls in here at about 9:33. AM 650 KGAB, Cheyenne's #1 news talk radio station. As far as the mayor in governing bodies across the state, that does vary widely. There are also some cities where the mayor does not vote with the city council as the governing body. Now, here in Cheyenne, the mayor does vote. So you've got a total of 10 votes. You've got the 3 city council wards with three city council representatives and the mayor for a total of 10. And by the way, if you have a 5-5 tie vote, that means whatever the proposal was, it is defeated. You need to get a majority. However, if there's only 9 people present and you get 5 votes, then you get it passed. It just depends on the circumstances. So you can really get into some real intricacies here in some of the local city governments, some of the local ordinances, how it works. It's different in all the communities. Laramie, Casper, they have a city manager. Okay, I've got a note here from Boyd Wiggum, who's an attorney and city council candidate. He says, in Cheyenne, the mayor is a true executive officer of the city with direct managerial authority over day-to-day operations. The mayor has to approve within the budget approved by the council. So in other words, how I would read that, and Boyd, correct me if I'm wrong, how I would read that is that the mayor can issue executive orders, but they can't fund those executive orders. I think that's right. I'm not a lawyer. That would be how I would read that. That, for example, the mayor could, issue an executive order on, let's say, on face mask. I think they could do that. But they could issue the order, but they couldn't pay for it because that's within the jurisdiction of the budget approved by the city council. So that would be how I would read that. That's a note from Boyd Wiggum, who is an attorney and who's running for the Cheyenne City Council. Again, he says, in Cheyenne, the mayor is a true executive officer of the city with direct managerial authority over day-to-day operations. The mayor has to operate within the budget approved by the council. I do know for a fact that here in Cheyenne, the mayor appoints, for example, the police chief. The mayor appoints department heads. However, as with the president and cabinet positions, they have to be approved by the Cheyenne City Council, the legislative body. I don't personally recall a situation here in Cheyenne where the mayors wanted to appoint somebody and the city council said no, but that doesn't mean it couldn't happen. Generally, I think the thinking is let's give the executive pretty much a free rein here within limits. However, if there was, if, let's say the mayor wanted to appoint a police chief and some folks had an issue with the police chief, I think they do have the authority to reject that. I've never seen that happen at the local level. I think legally it could. So, I don't know. We probably just muddied the waters some more there. But again, Boyd Wiggum says in Cheyenne, the mayor is a true executive officer with managerial authority over day-to-day operations. However, they can't appropriate money. So it's a little bit of a gray area there. They can make orders, but obviously whoever controls the purse strings also has a lot of influence over what policies go into effect, because if you can't pay for it, it's hard to make it happen, just like in real life. AM 650 KGAB, Cheyenne's #1 news talk radio station. Again, we expect to hear from Patrick Collins here the other side of the bottom of the hour news and information break. Patrick Collins, one of 2 nominees for the mayor of Cheyenne, and we'll be chatting with him coming up at 9:45. We do have a call scheduled with Laramie County Clerk Deborah Lee. We'll ask how things went yesterday. It was a different election than any we've ever had in local history, or probably anywhere in Wyoming, in terms of the high number of people voting absentee, the COVID-19 restrictions at the polling places, at the voting centers, and that sort of thing. So we'll chat with Deborah Lee about that, and that'll about wrap it up for a Wednesday. Glenn Woods will be back with you with the Wake Up Wyoming program again tomorrow morning, bright and early at 6 a.m. In the meantime, if you have anything on your mind, we do have a moment here for an open phone call or open phone line, 632-6500, 632-3323. If you want to give us a call, feel free. If not, then we'll wait to hear from Patrick Collins here at the bottom of the hour, just the other side of the news and information break. And we'll chat with him about what he sees as the campaign issues for the fall campaign. He really had a pretty impressive performance yesterday, pulled in 8,500 some odd votes, if I recall correctly, well in front of the other 2 candidates on the ballot. So I don't know. Does he have it as a slam dunk or not? That's something we can ask Patrick Collins when he calls in. Does a roughly 6,000 vote margin make you pretty comfortable, or do you still run as if you were behind? I don't know how to answer that. I've never run for election, but it'd be interesting to find out. Cheyenne's #1 news talk radio station, AM 650 KGAB. Just one weather note. Do be careful of the fire yet again today. We do expect some cloudy weather, but probably still very hot. We could have some dry lightning storms. That could certainly lead to some dangerous fire conditions. Do be careful. We're still expecting highs in the upper 80s to low 90s across much of the region. It's been a hot August here, certainly probably a little hotter than what you would normally see, at least in my memory. I'm ready for it to be fall. I'm ready for some cooler weather. I'm ready for fall in the air and ready for football, although we're not going to have all the football that we normally would have. Of course, the University of Wyoming won't be playing this fall. But it's still going to be fall, and that brings some cooler weather, and that's at least in my humble opinion, that is a good thing. Cheyenne's #1 news talk radio station, AM 650. National news headlines, probably the big thing. The Democrats formally nominating Joe Biden last night to be president of the United States. He will be, of course, running with Kamala Harris as his vice presidential candidate. Donald Trump not officially renominated yet, but that's basically a formality. He will be the Republican candidate, and we'll see how that shakes out come November 3rd. Most polls have Joe Biden ahead, but then again, most polls had Hillary Clinton ahead this time in 2016, so we'll see how that all plays out. I don't know how that'll impact any of our congressional races. Does the top of the ticket swing how people vote for Congress? Sometimes it does, sometimes not so much. So we'll see if that turns out to be an impact come November 3rd or not. Be interesting also to see if people continue to vote here in Wyoming, high numbers of absentee ballot voters, or if more people go to the polls and vote in person. A lot of that, no doubt, will have to do with the COVID-19 situation. Do we have a vaccine? Is it still a problem? It's kind of hard to visualize a situation come November 3rd where it's not a problem at all. Could be a lesser problem than it was yesterday, conceivably. I don't know. Nobody knows what's going to happen. But it's certainly within the realm of possibility that it could be. So those are some questions that could certainly impact how we vote come November 3rd. And maybe whether people vote early again or whether people turn up at the polls to vote physically on Election Day, or how that all pans out. In any case, AM 650 KGAB, Cheyenne's #1 news talk radio station. You're in tune with the Wednesday morning election wrap-up. We'll be back with Patrick Collins, mayoral nominee, here at the other side of the bottom of the news and information break, coming up just ahead. And then we have Laramie County Clerk Deborah Lee. Of course, if you have any questions or comments for either of those folks, we'll have an open phone line at 632-3323. Again, that's 632-3323 is the telephone number. Cheyenne's #1 news talk radio station, AM 650 KGAB. We'll go into a news and information break the other side of the bottom of the hour break and talk to Patrick Collins. That's just ahead right here on Cheyenne's #1 news talk radio station, AM 650 KGAB, Cheyenne's #1 news talk radio station. On the phone, I believe I have Cheyenne mayoral nominee Patrick Collins. Good morning, Patrick.
Good morning. How are you?
Doing well. How about yourself?
Doing well. I'm a little tired. Didn't get a lot of sleep last night, but I'm doing really well.
Well, you won by a wide margin. Do you think you have it in the...
Oh, heck no. Races in Wyoming, you got to work to the last minute. We're going to do that.
What sort of issues are you going to talk about for the fall campaign?
You know, I think a lot of the stuff that we talked about in the primary, the fact that I think people are looking for an experienced leader to bring that respectful leadership back to our city council. Those relationships are important with the city council, with the county commissioners, with our state elected officials, that Cheyenne is in a situation where the state's not in a position to financially help us going into the future, and that we're kind of on our own, and so we've got to grow that economy and working towards making sure that our rules and regulations match our desire to grow the economy. And I know it's not a sexy topic, but we got to get those potholes taken care of. So, I think those are some of the things that we'll continue to talk about.
Now, potholes seem to be the eternal issue in Cheyenne. What are we going to do about them?
I think the challenge with potholes is where we live, right? The water freezes and thaws, but I'm convinced that there are basic maintenance principles we can get back to that will seal those roads up. And we're always going to have some potholes, don't get me wrong, but we can get away from where the roads are just almost impassable like they have been. And so I'm looking forward to working with our staff and implementing the plan to do that. And quite frankly, we have this thing called the traffic management program, where they have a camera that drives every inch of our roads, and it puts it in the queue as to what condition those roads are, and then we can make a really good plan for roads based on that information. And we already currently have that information. We just need to implement it.
Now, of course, you do have a history on the Cheyenne City Council. You're running against someone who's never served in office. Does that give you an advantage?
Well, I would think as a mayor, it would sure give me an advantage. 12 years on the city council, and I was 4 years as president. I think having that inner knowledge of how the city works and those relationships definitely can give you an advantage in that situation. But you have to make sure you use those relationships correctly. I look at our city council as our board of directors, and they're the ones who implement the rules and regulations. The mayor can't do that. They can't pass laws by themselves. It takes the governing body to do that, and then the mayor's job is to implement those rules, regulations, ordinances, and resolutions. And so having that relationship with the city council is really imperative, because we're going to try to make some changes to the way we do business. We have to have those kinds of relationships. And as you look at our city council, it's a pretty experienced group.
Now, I don't know if you were listening a few minutes ago. We actually did have somebody call in asking about what specifically are the powers and duties of the mayor under the strong mayoral council form of government. My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong here, is that the mayor can issue executive orders, but they can only do that if it's something that doesn't need an appropriation. Am I right on that, or am I wrong?
I'm not even sure that that's, in fact, 100% correct. It's my understanding that, let's use the masks and things like that. Those come from the county and the state through their health officers. We're not in a position to make those rules or enforce those rules. Those relationships or those responsibilities are at the state level and through the county level. Dr. Hartman here locally with Dr. Emmons at the City County Health Department, they're going to make those decisions for us. Our job as a mayor is to work with the City Council to make sure that we have a clear understanding and then go forward and do what they ask us to do. So let's say they pass an ordinance. It's not their job to, once it's passed, that's where the mayor takes over to make sure that we implement those things in the most cost-effective way that we can. Same thing with the resolutions. We make sure that we do what the governing body, which the mayor is part of, in the most cost-effective and efficient way as possible.
Now, Patrick, as you know, there's been some friction between the existing city council and the existing mayor. It looks like we're going to have a different mayor in office come January, but how can we address this so we don't have these kind of problems going forward?
Yeah, and so we have to thank Mayor Orr for her service. There's a poem that Teddy Roosevelt had that talks about the credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena. She was in the arena, and as the poem talks about, you get bloodied and you make mistakes and you make good decisions, but you were at least in the arena, and so we have to thank her for being there. And you're right, we have had a rocky relationship between the executive branch and the city council, and that's where I hope my experience as a city council person will really be helpful. Like I said, I spent 12 years there, and I saw the good parts of being a city councilman and some of the times where I felt disrespected, and I remember those very, very clearly, and I will work really hard to make sure that the communication between the city council and the mayor is a positive one. We're not always going to agree, but I think what we have to do is promise each other that we're going to disagree in a way that we can continue to work together. So from my perspective, you'll never see a late night tweet or those types of things, social media attacking the city council or a decision they make. We're going to have those communications face to face, and we're going to do it in a really respectful way. I've been talking to many of the city council people on a regular basis already, and there's a few that I'm already trying to make those relationships happen so that when we hit the ground running, we'll have that respect for each other and that trust that we both have the city's best interest at heart.
How does running against a political outsider versus running against an incumbent mayor change how you'll do things in terms of your fall campaign, or does it?
I don't think so. From my perspective, it's all about, we just need to tell them what our story is, what our plan is, how we would govern as mayor of Cheyenne, and hopefully that'll be the story they want to hear, and we'll be successful. I think when you are running for office, it's more about what are you going to do for the city, and that's exactly how we ran the primary and how we'll run the election from now till November.
It's no secret that we're not likely to have a lot of money anytime soon. Do you expect to have to make cuts if you're elected?
I hope not. They've already cut pretty hard over this last year, and it all is going to depend on how our sales tax revenues and our funds come in. Now, if the state pulls that extra $4 million that we get every year from them, that's going to require some changes. But right now, I'm hopeful that the state will hold steady. That makes me nervous, but I hope they can hold steady for a while, and we can work on growing our economy, and we'll be able to go forward without having to make any cuts.
Were you surprised at the results yesterday?
I was pleased. I was really humbled by all of the support that we've gotten. All the people who financially contributed to our campaign, all the people who put signs in their yards, the people who voted for us. I mean, it was really humbling, and it was a really good day.
Now, Patrick, I do have another guest calling in at 9:45, so we have about 2.5 minutes. But when people go to vote on November 3rd, or if they vote early prior to November 3rd, and then they go to make a choice in the mayoral election, what would you like them to think about?
I'd like them to think about our message. You know, the fact that we're going to work really hard to govern with the city council in a real respectful manner, back and forth with each other, that we are either going to be green and growing or ripe and rotting, as a person told me years ago. And this city is going to work hard to be green and growing and doing the right things. That we're going to work really hard at taking care of road maintenance. And that I think in our pandemic, experience is going to matter. And, you know, being a small business person for 29 years, you know, I've had to make those hard decisions about balancing wants versus needs and making sure that we get the most bang for our buck. And that kind of a relationship, I think, will help me as a mayor, working towards, you know, with limited resources, we have to figure out what's going to be the most important thing and focus on those things. And we're not going to be able to do all the wants and the needs, or wants that everybody wants us to do. And then the 12 years on city council, you know, I've been in that arena, and I know exactly what that feels like. And hopefully that will give me an advantage from day one moving forward.
Okay, I'd like to thank my guest on this segment. I've been speaking with mayoral nominee Patrick Collins. Thank you for calling in. I appreciate it.
Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
AM 650 KGAB, Cheyenne's #1 news talk radio station, awaiting a call from Laramie County Clerk Deborah Lee. She probably had a late night last night. I hope she didn't forget about our interview, but I was going to ask her how everything went with the different circumstances this year. I was going to ask her about turnout, and we hopefully will be hearing from her here. Getting a little. AM 650 KGAB, Cheyenne's #1 news talk radio station. On the phone, I believe I have Laramie County Clerk Deborah Lee. Good morning, Deborah.
Good morning.
So how did everything go yesterday with all the differences this year?
Yeah, it went smoothly, and we were able to get results actually earlier than I anticipated. And I will stress those are unofficial results, of course.
What's the process for those unofficial results becoming official?
Well, the canvassing board meets on Friday at 3 p.m., and we go through all the numbers and look through any provisional ballots that may have been cast. And provisional ballots, as you may know, are those ballots where the voters' eligibility to cast and have a vote count were in question. Maybe a person did not bring identification and they were a new registrant. So the provisional ballot gives them a chance to actually vote, but it's held aside until they come in and bring their identification and establish their qualifications to register and vote. That's one example. So usually we don't have too many of those, but anyway, the canvassing board will review the whole process from A to Z, after which they will certify the election results, and we will send the federal and state results from Laramie County to the Secretary of State's office.
Now, do they actually do a physical recount, or what happens with that?
No, well, we only need to do a recount if the margin is 1% between candidates. That calls for a mandatory county recount.
Was the margin between Mr. Coppinger and Mayor Orr small enough to trigger a recount?
You know, we still have to look at that, because we do have to look at any provisional ballots that may enter into the mix.
So it's conceivable it could trigger a recount.
It's conceivable, yes.
What would the margin have to get down to roughly to trigger that recount, if we know?
You know, I can't say. Well, it's 1%.
So what would that be for the? I don't know. Round numbers. What's that? A couple hundred or?
Yeah, I've looked at so many numbers.
Oh, I understand.
I don't know, but we will go through every office race and look at those figures and see if a recount is required. And what we do is we notify the candidates involved of the date and time we will do the recount, and that's the process, and they're welcome to come and observe it.
Can a candidate request a recount if it's outside?
The candidate can.
And how will that work?
Can. Hold on just a second. The candidate has to request it within so many days.
Okay.
And off the top of my head, I don't have that number, but there is a process for that. They have to request it in writing, and they have to state the reasons why they are requesting a recount.
And what are some potential reasons?
If they believe there was some irregularity or some issue that needs to be considered. Also, they can just request a recount, and which they then have to pay for.
And how expensive is that?
There is a figure. It's in the Secretary of State's rules, and it's not terribly expensive, but they do have to pay something to do a recount.
Now, Deborah,
request a recount.
Deborah, I thought, and I'm just a layman, so correct me if I'm wrong here. I thought the turnout was a little low yesterday. Was that right about that?
Yeah, it seemed pretty light to me. It was steady, but it was light, and in fact, based on the figures I have, there were more people voting early or by absentee ballot than there were in person. The in-person numbers were smaller. But as you know, we had a large increase in absentee ballots, a very large increase.
Probably the largest we've ever seen, I would think.
The largest we have ever seen by far.
Can you remember a local election where more people voted absentee than in person?
No, I cannot.
I'll bet that's never happened.
No. This is I think unprecedented.
So things went pretty smooth, though, considering everything was different.
Yeah, everything was different. New equipment, new procedures, and, of course, the COVID protocols we had to put in place.
How did those go?
You know, I haven't heard any issues from them, so I think things went smoothly. And what we will do, Doug, is we're going to bring our election coordinators together because we had one coordinator at each polling site. And we will also meet with our staff who was all day at the vote centers and get their feedback on what we could do better, what, maybe we need more voter education on something. Maybe we need to organize the process a little more efficiently. So we'll get their feedback since they were the ones who were there, from 6 a.m. until after 7.
Wow, made for a long day, that's for sure.
Very long. And, I just have to give a shout-out to our election judges because it is a long day and it's a lot of work.
Deborah, I'm sure we expect a larger turnout for elections. General elections tend to have bigger turnouts, yes. I think, especially in presidential years.
Yes.
How much of an increase in vote? Do we have any idea?
I'm expecting a significant increase. I mean, already, Doug, we've already had, I believe, 13,000 requests for absentee ballots for the general.
Oh, wow.
And we're still getting them in.
And so that's more even than voted absentee for the primary.
That's correct. That's correct.
Now, when will the early voting and all that sort of thing start for the general, or do we know yet?
Oh, yeah, I do know. That starts September, I want to say 18. Hold on just a second. September 18, early voting starts. So 1 month from yesterday, it starts.
So what would be a typical Laramie County turnout for a presidential general election in terms of total voter turnout?
It's not, it is, well, it is higher. Yeah, it's usually, because Wyoming has same-day registration,
right.
The numbers end up usually over 100%. So it makes it hard to really say what it is.
So you think it might be over 37,000 then?
It could well be. It could well be, Doug.
Because as I recall, that was the registered voter number going into yesterday. And
Right. And we did have some new registrations yesterday. We had somewhere just under 1,500 new registrants.
Deborah, did you hear of any problems across the state with counting votes?
I did not, Doug. I did not. I'm unaware of any.
So it went smoother than maybe we might have expected going in.
Perhaps, yeah. It appears so.
Okay, I'm speaking with Laramie County Clerk Deborah Lee. Deborah, that's mostly all I had for you. Was there anything else you wanted to say about the vote yesterday or voting in the general election or anything else related to voting?
Well, people are requesting absentee ballots now for the general. In fact, we had several calls yesterday for general election absentee ballots. So, and later on, we'll, I think, talk some more about, what's on the ballot and how voters can cast their ballot and make their absentee ballot count, and also how to use our new voting machines.
Do we expect to have the same voting centers in effect in November, or do we know?
Yes, we do.
So the same 7 that we had yesterday?
Yes, that's
okay.
correct.
Anything else people should know, Deborah?
I can't think of, well, again, to stress that the results are unofficial until they are canvassed by the canvassing board. And we are looking today, we'll take a deep look at every race and determine if, in fact, a recount is required.
Okay. Deborah, I appreciate your time this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Doug. I appreciate all you do.
Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.
AM 650 KGAB, that's about going to wrap it up for our Wednesday morning election wrap-up. I guess the big takeaway from the interview with Deborah Lee, keep in mind, these election results are not official. There's still a possibility of a recount in any of the races that were close. Candidate could still ask for a recount. So the results will not be official until after the canvassing board meets on Friday afternoon. In any case, I'd like to thank you for joining us this morning. Had a good time this morning. Lots of stuff to mull over. Lots of great input. It's been an interesting year. 2020's been interesting anyway, if you know what I mean. But that's another subject. But we will, of course, have Glenn Woods back with you bright and early tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. with the Wake Up in Wyoming program. And we'll continue, of course, to monitor the election campaigns. Candidates, I would imagine, catching their breath for the next couple of days or so. But I'm sure it'll be back on the campaign trail before long for most of them. In any case, thank you for joining us. Have a great day. I'll talk to you this weekend. Glenn will be back with you bright and early tomorrow right here on AM 650 KGAB.